Welcome, everyone, to episode 54 of the RDH Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chad. Joined alongside me is my brother, Tanner. How's it hanging, dude?
It's hanging. Every week we come on here, we say how we're doing. It's been a good week. We've had some good sports. We're getting back to our part two of these NFL draft grades because we've left you guys a little bit hanging, but maybe that was intentional. Maybe we just wanted to see what would happen. But we saved the best for last, so I think it's ready to jump right into it, Chad.
There we go. Tanner mentioned it. Today on deck, we have NFL draft grades. We got new NFL quarterback contracts we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk about the NHL playoffs, the NBA playoffs, and Tanner's Corner 3 segment. And I got a blog post about the San Jose Sharks that I'm going to share with you guys because for the first time in franchise history, San Jose Sharks have the number one overall pick in the draft coming up next month. So I'm gonna get into that blog post as well. But just like Tanner mentioned, we're gonna jump into part two of the NFL draft grades. We're gonna briefly talk about these teams. We're not gonna go as in depth as part one, mainly because there's only 10 teams left. So we got 10 teams left, starting with the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans Saints, first round pick 14, take Talise Fuaga, the offensive tackle out of Oregon State. I'm a big fan of that pick, huge fan, because for some reason I just was an Oregon State Beaver fan this year. No clue why, mainly because of this prospect, honestly. And believe it or not, I do like watching offensive linemen, and this was one of my favorite offensive linemen and ended up becoming number 2 on my offensive lineman rankings. And he did not, it may have not necessarily fallen in that order for the NFL draft, but hey, this is still a very good run blocking Mauler type offensive tackle that's going to be a plug on that right or left side, whichever side they pick for New Orleans. Then in the second round, they take Kool-Aid McKinstry, the cornerback out of Alabama, and then they don't pick again until the 5th round, where they took the quarterback Spencer Rattler, and then a guy that I really wanted to call out at round 5, pick 40, Jalen Ford, the linebacker out of Texas. I think that's a guy that has the opportunity to make this team for the Saints, and he's going to be learning behind Demario Davis. Not sure how much veteran leadership is going to be there right off the rip because it was a 5th round pick, and 5th round picks are kind of fighting for their lives when it comes to NFL draft teams. You know what I mean? But Kool-Aid McKinstry, Tanner, you've seen this cornerback from Alabama, and he's a very, very good corner. He was not the number 1 corner taken out of Alabama. Terrion Arnold was. But were you a little bit shocked that Kool-Aid McKinstry fell all the way to the 2nd round? A lot of folks thought he was going to get taken at the end of the first.
Yeah, I think it is a big surprise because out of those two, it's like which Alabama corner is going to go higher. You talked on it a lot. When we were on that draft night, it's like coming into this year, he was that number 1 corner for Alabama, and then Terrion Arnold kind of took that mantle from him, right, because of his Kool-Aid McKinstry's, kind of decline in play, right? So I think that was kind of the reason why he was waiting, or why he was still sitting there in the 2nd round. I think people were just a little bit more confident about Terrion Arnold than Kool-Aid. And I don't think that, is a bad thing, though. I think that, he's still very, very good. He's still a 2nd round pick. He's still going to have a lot of chance to develop. And now he's in the New Orleans Saints, which, they got a pretty good pretty good corner sitting over there in Marshawn Lattimore that he can learn from. So I think he'll be just fine. They have very good defensive backs over there in New Orleans, and they know how to coach him well. So I'm not really, honestly, too worried about him. I think he'll become, hopefully for them, a starter. But I really do like this draft for them. With Fuaga, I think that line needed some more tackles. I think they had Ramczyk on the other side, and then they have him. Who I think is supposed to be the right tackle, I think, at this point, but we'll see when training camps.
That's what they're projecting.
So I think, get some more youth on that line, get that line, back to where it could have been. In the years past, we saw with Drew Brees that line was absolutely disgusting, and it hasn't really been like that recently. So I think rebuilding it from the ground up is a great move. And then Spencer Rattler, I think it's an investment pick. That's obvious. So it's like, Derek Carr, he's over there in New Orleans. It's like, is he working? He's not exactly not working. He's not exactly working. Like, what is the plans for the future? They just got rid of Jameis Winston from their, as a backup, and he's now in Cleveland. So I don't, quarterback really, I guess, isn't on their mind right now, but hopefully they can develop Spencer Rattler into a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL. We'll see, depending on what happens. But honestly, I'm going to give this I like it. I'm going to give it a B-. That's my draft grade for this. I like it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of right there with you. It's really hard to judge a team when you only have, two picks in the first five or three picks.
Mm-hmm.
And or sorry, math is not good right now. Two picks in the first four rounds. That's
Yeah.
insane. Only two. You know what I mean? When you only have two picks in the first four rounds, it's really hard to have a good draft, but this team did.
Mm-hmm.
They got a number two cornerback that is easily going to walk in and be a number two behind Marshawn Lattimore, just like you mentioned. Going to learn from him. I think that's going to be great. And then you've got the Spencer Rattler pick in the fifth round, where other experts, projected him to go as high as the third. I saw him going as high as the third round before all this pre-draft stuff started. I kind of figured he was going to be in the 5 to 7 range because he's just he's so inconsistent. One
Yeah.
game he'll go out and throw 303 touchdowns. The next game he will not throw a touchdown and he'll throw about 3 interceptions. And a lot of reports came out that they didn't like his Netflix show in high school, which I've seen. But that, to me, it's like, dude, he's a high school kid. Like what high school kid?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I thought that was very interesting when I was reading that. But he fell till the fifth round. The Saints were like, you know what, this is enough. The fifth round, fourth round, maybe the third round, definitely the second round. If you got a starting quarterback there, you may be scratching your head, just like Kirk Cousins was when Atlanta took Michael Penix Jr. in the first round. But Derek Carr in the fifth round, that's not anything to worry about. And I think he can learn from Derek Carr. And I think that this is absolutely an investment pick. And I'm right there with you. I'm going to give him a B minus. Jumping to the New York Giants, the next team, they finished 6-11 last year. Not the best, but what were they missing?
Yikes.
A wide receiver. And what did they get? They got a wide receiver from LSU. Round 1, pick 6, Malik Neighbors. The second round, pick 15, the number 1 safety and the first safety that had been drafted at that point. That's right, lasted until the second round. Tyler Nubin out of Minnesota, who's my number 1 safety by far. Then Andrew Phillips, the cornerback from Kentucky, and then a tight end in the fourth round, pick 7, Theo Johnson. Then a Purdue running back in the fifth round, and then a linebacker from UCLA, Darius Masau, in the sixth round. They didn't pick in the seventh round, but Malik Neighbors, A+ on that pick. Absolute A+ on that pick. Rome Odunze was still sitting there, but I understand why you take Neighbors over Odunze. I get that. I totally understand that because Neighbors is a guy that is a literal highlight reel. And for you to have that much yards in college and have that much production in college, I get Jane Daniels is throwing to him. But my goodness, Neighbors completely took over games. Not to mention his counterpart that got taken in the 20s, Brian Thomas Jr. as well. Just such a sick team. And then they take Tyler Nubin, the safety out of Minnesota, the best safety in the draft, in the second round, in the middle of the second round. And they do need cornerback help, and they took him in the third, so position and need there. I'm going to give the Giants, even though it's 6 picks total in the NFL draft, I really like their first 2. And I'm going to also give them a B- in this one because those first 2 picks, they absolutely hit on them. And the rest of them, you can argue that every single one of them was position of need. What do you give the New York Giants, Tanner?
I think I'm gonna go with a B- as well. I think that just no man, I'm gonna bump it up to a B. I like this draft a lot because I think it's just like you said, Malik Neighbors. I think that they kind of hit that out of the park. I think that was a home run pick, A+ all the way, and it's gonna be nice to see some new blood over there in New York. Just some high receiver, someone who's drafted high, who's got so much talent, and hopefully can do something over there because they haven't had a receiver since Odell Beckham, and that's pretty much the truth of it. I think it's going to be nice to see him with Darius Slayton, see how he fits in with him. And I think their other one is Wan'Dale Robinson. So, I think he's going to go in there, can be the clear number 1, and I think he's going to get a ton of targets his rookie season, and I think he's going to get a bunch of experience. So, hopefully, it ends up like the Jamar Chase kind of version of a rookie receiver rather than the, Quentin Johnston version of a rookie receiver. But, we'll see on that. I got a lot of faith in this kid, though. But with Tyler Nubin, I think that is, like you said, it's a position of need, and it's one of those things where it's like they just got rid of Xavier McKinney. We talked about him last podcast. He was a very good safety for New York, and had been playing very well. So the fact that they replaced him pretty much immediately after he left is just a sign that okay, that defense just locked and reloaded, ready to go. They made a bunch of big free agency moves, and they got Brian Burns, I'm pretty sure, over there on that line now. They got Kayvon Thibodeau in the years past in that draft, and it was. They're slowly building up this defense, and they're slowly, contributing and making that team actually kind of scary again. So I like it a lot. I'm going to give them a B. Overall, you can say whatever towards the end of the rounds, but I like the cornerback pick out of Kentucky as well. I think that, like you said, it's position need. So B overall.
Yeah, not a bad one. Now, moving on to the New York Jets. They took Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle out of Penn State, in the first round. Then the third round, pick one. They did not pick in the second round. Malachi Corley, the wide receiver out of Western Kentucky. Then the running back Braylon Allen falls all the way to the fourth round out of Wisconsin. Then in the fifth round, the Florida State quarterback who got injured at the end of the year, who was undefeated at the time, Jordan Travis, they take there, and then a couple other guys as well. But we're going to hit on those first four picks. I mean, Fashanu, the offensive tackle out of Penn State, that's a home run for me. That's an absolute home run of a pick for the Jets. That is a starting tackle for the next decade, if you want to keep him there. Malachi Corley, the wide receiver to Western Kentucky, he was a 2-3 for me. So I think he kind of went right where he was supposed to go. And with how many receivers actually went in his draft, I think that was a position of need and also a great pick, because when you have a guy like Aaron Rodgers and you already have a number one very young wide receiver with Garrett Wilson over there in New York, all you want to do is bring in young receivers because Aaron Rodgers can develop that connection, right? He had that connection with Jordy Nelson, right? He had that connection with Randall Cobb. Those guys were on the same team. And so it's like you need more than just one guy because they're going to double or triple cover Garrett Wilson. Now, the Jets also have a pretty solid running game with their running back there. So it's one of those things where it's like the Jets can actually balance run and pass this year. The other team in New York, the Giants we just hit, they can't. They cannot balance that at all because they are literally only throwing to Malik Neighbors, and Saquon was let go in free agency. So the Giants are going to be passing a lot. And last thing I want to do, hit on these rookie wide receivers, and then I'll bring it back to the Jets. If you're a fantasy player, I think these rookie wide receivers are going to get more targets. If you're in a PPR league, they're going to get some targets, just like Tanner was saying. And you have the first wide receiver that went with Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Arizona Cardinals. Who's the Arizona Cardinals' number one wide receiver? Marvin Harrison Jr. You have the Giants, who took Malik Neighbors Jr. in the first round, pick 6, like we just said. Who's the Giants' number one wide receiver? Malik Neighbors Jr. Then you have the Bears, who come back and take Rome Odunze. They already have DJ Moore. They already have Keenan Allen. So I think that the first two receivers in this year's draft that were taken with Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. are must picks in fantasy. The running backs, I'd stay away from. Anyway, back to the Jets. Back to the Jets here. Malachi Corley, like I was saying, the wide receiver out of Western Kentucky. Aaron Rodgers is going to make him right. Watched a ton of tape on this player, and that's right where he was supposed to go. And then Braylon Allen, he was so close. He was so close. One pick to falling to the fifth round where I exactly had him, but he had to go in the fourth round. It's okay. It's okay. I'm not mad.
It's pretty close.
And then Jordan Travis there in the fifth round. I think this is a B plus, if not an A minus that I'm going to give these guys, because Jordan Travis is coming off an injury. You're not starting anybody over Aaron Rodgers. You're not. You know what I mean? So Jordan Travis has to sit anyway. Braylon Allen, guess what? Bowling ball. Have fun. You know what I mean? That guy's making the team. Absolutely. Then you got a wide receiver that's going to make the team. And then you got an offensive tackle. Go ahead, Tanner. I've talked long enough about the Jets, but this draft's got me excited for Jets.
I like it a lot. I think, starting with, Fashanu, I think the biggest thing coming into this draft was like, all right, we do not want to have what happened last year. I think that's pretty obvious. You don't want your star quarterback to go down. And what's the best thing to do? Protect him to make sure, no one gets to him. No pass rushers are, shedding off your linemen and just going right at Aaron Rodgers. So I think, the best thing is just keep him in the pocket, keep him safe, and that was the motivation behind that pick. Get an offensive tackle for the future of franchise, left or right tackle, and just sit him over there and be like, don't let him touch Aaron. So love the pick, A plus. And going on to the next few, I really like the Western Kentucky Malachi Corley pick, because it's just, I think something too is like, yes, they have Garrett Wilson, and they also got Mike Williams in free agency. So he's walking in there as the number 3. So that's an absolutely loaded wide receiver core right there. So, he doesn't have to be the number 1 guy. He's just got to go in there, and he's going to learn from these two veterans, these two very, very different kind of veterans. Garrett Wilson is kind of very route running, can go anywhere, run a lot of different kind of routes. But Mike Williams, he's typical go ball kind of guy. He's the guy you're going to line up on the side and let him do whatever he does on those defensive backs. So he's going to learn from both of those guys and probably pick up a lot from both of them. And like you said with Aaron Rodgers, kind of coaching him up to like, go here, do this, just getting a good relationship with him. So I like that pick a lot. And with Braylon Allen and Jordan Travis, they're obviously not going to see the field as much as, these other kind of guys are because of, Breece Hall and Aaron Rodgers. But with Jordan Travis, it's kind of a perfect situation. He goes down during the season and season-ending injury. And it's just like, what do you do? Like, oh, you're still going to get drafted to the Jets, funny enough, who just had Aaron Rodgers with a season-ending injury, who was kind of playing by the end of the season. You know what I mean? That was like a crazy quick recovery. So, maybe he can learn some recovery methods from him. I don't know. It's kind of thinking about like, how is Aaron Rodgers going to help along Jordan Travis and, with Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. I think Braylon Allen's obviously going to get more playing time than Jordan Travis will, but the Jets like to run that two running back system. Obviously, Breece Hall is the number one guy and he will be the number one guy, but you got to have a change of pace back, and Braylon Allen's going to be that kind of guy for Breece Hall. So I think top 4 picks, outstanding. Absolutely hit them all out of the park. So I'm going to go with a B+. I like it. I think that, coming into this draft, it was like kind of surprising. It's like, oh, this is what Jets fans wanted, but they reloaded, they got more ammo, and their team is even better than it was last year. So I think, it's looking up for Jets fans.
Absolutely. Then moving to the Philadelphia Eagles, the first pick they had was pick 22 in the first round. They got Kenyon Mitchell, my number one cornerback out of Toledo. Then they double down again, the second round, pick 8, which was a trade. A ton of trades here from the Philadelphia Eagles. They get Cooper DeJean, the cornerback out of Iowa, who is still sitting there. Unbelievable pick by them. Then they get an edge in the third round, pick 31 out of Houston Christian. Another trade from his last name is Hunt. I'm not really sure how to say that first name. Julks Hunt. And then fourth round, pick 27, they got Will Shipley, the running back out of Clemson, who's solid. And then round 5, pick 17, I think this might be their best round. They got Ainias Smith, the wide receiver out of Texas A&M. Round 5, pick 20, they get the linebacker Jeremiah Trotter Jr. out of Clemson. That's right, he was still there. And then they finish it off in round 5, pick 37 with Trevor Keegan, the offensive guard out of Michigan, who I thought was honestly going to go in the 3rd to 4th round. So all I got to say here about the Eagles is they probably had the best draft, if not very, very close to the best draft. So I'm going to give the Eagles an A. Absolutely give them an A. It's insane to me that you have, what's their number one position of need? Cornerback. What do? They go get arguably the number 1 and number 3 corner on the board. At the end of the first round, the beginning of the second round, the edge pick I don't love. So that's why I'm not giving the Eagles an A+. I'm giving them an A. If I loved the edge pick, I would have given them an A+. But that's the only pick out of Houston Christian. Hunt, I'm not the biggest fan of. But then they follow it with Will Shipley out of Clemson, Ainias Smith out of A&M, and then Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the linebacker out of Clemson, which is insane. The fact that Jeremiah Trotter Jr. was still there, he was a top 5 linebacker for me in this draft class, and he fell to the 5th round. Ainias Smith, the wide receiver out of A&M, if he can hone in on some of those 100-yard plus receiving games in the NFL, that's going to be a problem with him and Devontae Smith, especially those two kind of players. Ainias Smith is probably going to immediately come in and play the slot if he makes the team.
Mm-hmm.
And then Will Shipley, the running back out of Clemson, probably not going to see the field a whole lot this year, especially with the signing of Saquon Barkley and all of the other guys that they already have behind him. But still, like Tanner just said, bringing in a change of pace back is not bad. So I give the Eagles an A, very, very close to an A+, but probably the best draft. What do you give them, Tanner?
A+. I think that they had the best draft. I think that it was pretty clear, talking on your points with, their biggest position in need was cornerback, I completely agree. They got torched in the secondary this past season, and that was a lot of the reasons why, they kind of had that fall toward the end of the season. They were just, Darius Slay wasn't playing as good as he, normally is. James Bradbury is kind of like, hit or miss, but it's very, very rare that you see, position of need line up with best player available, especially in the NFL draft. And the fact that it lined up 2 times in a row for them, I think is just outstanding. I think you got to give them a pat on the back just for sitting and picking and waiting, because they got the two best corners in the draft and they didn't even have to do anything. So it's like their second round pick they had to trade up for, but at that point it's like, well, we got to go get them. Like we can absolutely just reload our defense in one draft, and that's what you're kind of looking for here if you're Philly, because they're in a win now situation. They need guys who can come in and help immediately. So that's exactly what they did. They got the best two corners, and they're probably going to be the corners for the future as well. So it's just a little cherry on top with those boys. But with the edge pick from Houston Christian, I think it Hunt. I'm gonna guess Jalix. That's my guess.
Yeah.
That's my guess. But
It's a hard one.
Yeah.
I've botched all these names. And oh, by the way, everyone commenting that I'm mispronouncing names. Thank you, but I don't care. Yeah, I really it's gonna be happening so long.
Yeah, and you can't really blame us with Jalyx. That one's kind of tough.
It's a tough one.
If you start putting letters towards the end of the alphabet in there, it kind of gets difficult. But with this guy, I think with Hassan Reddick, his departure is kind of the big reason why they drafted this kid. They're like, all right, let's go get probably, in their opinion, the top remaining pass rusher that was on their board in that third round, right? Because you really don't have a pass rush threat when Hassan Reddick is gone, because he played very, very well when he was in there, and now he's not there. So it's kind of filling the void. I think that was kind of the big reason for that. And that's kind of why I'm like, okay, I kind of understand the pick given the situation that they were in. But like you said, with Anaya Smith too, I think he's electric. Got to watch him for multiple years in college in person. He's just one of those guys where, he can return the ball. He can return kicks and punts. Like you said, he can line up in the slot. Sometimes, if you wanted him to, he can line up in the backfield and act as a running back. He can do pretty much anything on offense. He's kind of one of those swift Army knives. So I think that, like you said, I think he's going to probably find most of his success in the slot, just going behind A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. It's just going to be, pretty easy pickings for him if he's a rookie. Everyone's going to look at those guys, and Anaya Smith's just like, hey, give me the ball. So it's like, I think it's going to be good. And I don't know. I think that he's going to have a lot of success if they do put him back at that punt return, kick return position, because he was electric at A&M when he was doing that. So that's all instinct too. That's something you can't teach. That's just something you have to know and something you have to feel. And he's got it. So I think that he's got that extra little something. Love to see him drafted there. And he's going to have a chance to play. And yeah, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., that's disgusting. And I think that they just got another linebacker that's going to be there and, continue to do the things that Philly does. So A+, man. I think that they found every position of need with best player available. So I think that they pretty much killed it. 100% A+.
They nailed it from Tanner. Going to the Pittsburgh Steelers next. The first round, pick 20, they got the first guard off the board from Washington, Troy Fontanu. Then the second round, pick 19, they got the second center off the board with Zach Frazier. Unbelievable pick there. Then they got the round 3, pick 20, Roman Wilson, the wide receiver out of Michigan. Did not think he was going to be there in the third. Then every year, I miss on some players. And I had, we'll see what happens by the end of his career, but I had Peyton Wilson out of North Carolina State, the linebacker who they got in the third round. I thought for sure he was going to be going in the second round or maybe at the end of the first. And he was in my top 50 as well. So that's insane that he lasted that long. But those are the guys that I think that we got to highlight in this draft, because that is an unbelievable haul right there. And the fact that arguably your number one need is a center, I get it. You might be able to throw wide receiver, maybe cornerback in there as well. But center's your number one need. And they were able to get the best center available by far in the second round. That's exactly where I thought he was going to go, with Zach Frazier out of West Virginia. That's a center that will be there for a long time. And they needed some offensive guard help, and they get the number one guard in the draft. So they got the number one guard, the number two center, probably somewhere between 15 and 20 for most people's boards for wide receivers, if not 10 to 15. Then you got Peyton Wilson, who has injury history, but if he can, not get injured, which is, coming from a Dallas Cowboys fan, that's tough, especially at the linebacker position. That's a home run pick, an absolute home run pick at the very end of the third round, if not almost right into the fourth round. So for me, Pittsburgh did really, really good, and I'm going to give them a B-. What do you got, Tanner? Or not a B-, sorry, a B.
It's just one of those things where this is completely just like all right, we have a need, and this need is the offensive line. These guys, they came in there and they want to rebuild that offensive line, and I think that's pretty much the biggest thing that they needed to do. I like the first two picks with Fatanu and Frazier because it's addressing, like you said, the biggest need, in my opinion, on their roster. You drafted Najee Harris to kind of be that guy of the future, and he really hasn't. He's played well, but I think in the eyes of fans, he really hasn't become the guy that they wanted him to be. So maybe that's due to Najee. Maybe that's due to the offensive line. There's not really a lot of guys helping him out there. It's not the Steelers' offensive line of old. It's like what we talked about with the Saints. They just need to reload that thing and they need to give it another shot because an offensive line can change your entire team because they just have that kind of effect. They give you that much more time to make those kind of plays, and you want that much more time with Russell Wilson and these George Pickens, who's gonna sometimes take a little bit to get out of his routes because these longer kind of routes and stuff like that. You want to give Russell Wilson the time to get the ball to him. So if he doesn't have that time, it's not going to happen. And make Russell Wilson comfortable. We know that he is at one point was a Hall of Fame quarterback in his career, and hopefully he can kind of replicate that in Pittsburgh, given the security blanket that is that new offensive line. Hopefully, so I like it. It's not the craziest draft in the world, but with Peyton Wilson, he's going to go in there and he's going to fit like a glove. And linebackers in Pittsburgh, they just kind of go well together. Not to mention, too, like Patrick Queen, they also got in free agency, so he's going to have to learn behind him and learn a bunch of stuff from him. So I think he's going to be, I think Peyton Wilson's going to be just fine. I think he's going to, be a Pittsburgh Steeler linebacker. You're going to see him in a lot of games coming up. So I'm going to give him a B minus, just because it's not the sexiest draft, but I think that it did address a bunch of their needs, and they got what they wanted out of it.
Definitely. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks, they take the absolute freak of nature, the guy that stole the show at the NFL Combine, Byron Murphy II, the defensive tackle out of Texas. If you haven't seen what he did at the Combine, pretty much every record that was set with him, it's unbelievable. You're not supposed to be that athletic as a defensive tackle, and he was. Now, was defensive tackle a position of need for the Seahawks? Not a whole lot of people thought the Seahawks were going to take a defensive tackle, let alone in the first round, but they did. And the Seahawks draft strategy was the best available player, and that's exactly who they took. Then they take the offensive guard Christian Haynes out of UConn, which was a pretty solid pick in the third round. Then in the fourth round, they take Tyrese Knight, the linebacker out of UTEP. Then in the fourth round, they take AJ Barner, the tight end out of Michigan, and they got some other guys in there from the fifth to the seventh. The only pick I like in this draft, to be honest with you, is the first round. The rest of them, I'm not really a fan of. The guard out of UConn is not a bad pick, but third round, I had him kind of mocked as a four to five guy. So I think that was a little bit early for him. But when you're that late in the draft and you have to wait all the way again till the fourth round, a whole nother round in a pick, your guy's probably not going to be there. So that's why they took him. So I'm going to give the Seattle Seahawks I'm going to give them a C or C plus. I don't think that it was I think they needed a lot more, and I don't think they took a lot of needs. And with the crazy amount of picks that they had in the sixth round, it's kind of insane that they also didn't really address needs there. But we'll see what happens next year. I could be wrong. I've been wrong about these prospects before, but I'm going to give them a C plus because of the Byron Murphy and the Christian Haynes pick. The rest of it, I'm not the biggest fan of. And real quick, the sixth round they took Suatao Lumatiu. I don't even know, Utah, the offensive guard. Sixth round they took DJ James, the cornerback out of Auburn, and then at the end of the sixth round, pick 31, they took Michael Jarrell, the offensive tackle out of Findlay. Tanner, what do you give the Seattle Seahawks in this draft?
I'm going to give him a C. I think that I like the draft. Obviously, the Byron Murphy pick is, very exciting. It's the, best player at that position available in this draft, which is awesome, but in my opinion, I don't think that I think it's a good pick, let me say that. But I think that I would have liked an offensive lineman taken there, realistically, because I just don't really think that they have really a lot on that offensive line. You go down the list and they got Charles Cross, who they drafted recently, which I think has been a good addition. Their center is Nick Harris, which is good. But everyone else is, Laken Tomlinson, their left guard. Right guard's Anthony Bradford. Right tackle is Abraham Lucas. They're not names that, stand out to you. Names that are going to, be the guys of the future. So I would have liked them to take at least a tackle, maybe a guard in that position, probably a tackle, just to put on the other side of Charles Cross and give yourself, Geno some more time in the pocket. But I understand the pick. Their defensive line is absolutely disgusting now, and I will go through it. They got Byron Murphy, of course, as you know. They have Draymond Jones, Jaron Reed, Leonard Williams, and Boye Mafe now on that defensive line. So whoever was saying, that it's not that good, it's pretty good. It's pretty good now.
That's a
So
lot of beef and potatoes, huh?
yeah, you're not running on these boys. They're probably going to get to the quarterback a couple times too. So it's as a unit, I think they're pretty solid. I think that they have the defensive line pretty much locked up for the foreseeable future. And they're they're a secondary and linebackers are coming along, but I think that defensive line is going to massively improve that defense. So maybe that's what they're going for. It's not that uncommon to see a Seattle team building through defense. So it doesn't surprise me at all, and it's not a bad strategy. In fact, it's the one that I would prefer instead of trying to rebuild that offense. I would rather rebuild the defense and then worry about the offense once the defense is disgusting.
Well, and you also too, you got some playmakers on the offensive side of the ball to where you don't have to really address it outside of the offensive line, like you mentioned. And then they have a very good safety too.
Mm-hmm.
Seattle does out of Illinois, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, yeah, like you said, Seattle builds out of the defensive line. But to add something to you, and I want to ask you this question: this is post Pete Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
Did you expect them to kind of go a different direction they usually did? I kind of did. But at the same time, that's why I really like watching the NFL draft, because it shows you some head coaches have a lot of influence.
Yeah, and
Every single pick the Detroit Lions picked, you're telling me Dan Campbell didn't have his head in there? He
absolutely.
did.
Absolutely.
Seattle? I don't know.
Yeah, and they've been that kind of team that has drafted well. That's why the Legion of Boom was the Legion of Boom. They drafted all those guys and made them what they wanted them to be. So I think that I think Seattle still kind of has that mindset that's like, these are our guys. We're going to take the guys that we want to take and rebuild in the way that we want to do it. And I think it's a good strategy. I haven't seen it not work for them, but I have seen it work for them once, so it might as well work again. I'm not going to bash on that first round pick at all. I think Byron Murphy's a hit out of the park, like we said, but everyone else is kind of like, we'll see what happens. It's kind of like the Dallas Cowboys, right? We're just going to draft guys we like. If they work out, they work out. They don't, sucks. So I'm a fan of the draft though, but give me like a C, just because it's not exciting. It's hard to do that. They have a first round pick and then the next pick is in the third round, and they go with Christian Haynes out of UConn. So it's like they addressed it, but it almost feels at that point like a little bit too late to address that offensive line.
Yeah, and I mean, this draft, I think a lot of the meat on the bone was second to third round, and the only reason I didn't give him a D was because that guard out of UConn that they took, and I don't that not even was the best offensive lineman prospect on UConn in my opinion. So that's kind of why I give him there. This team, San Francisco 49ers are next. That there was a lot of head scratchers in round one. The first head scratcher was obviously Michael Penix Jr., and there was a couple in between that, but round one, pick 31, they took Ricky Pearsall, the wide receiver out of Florida. If you have ever watched Odell Beckham in college and all the one-handed catches that he does in warm-up, that's this kid. That is exactly what he does. He makes unbelievable, spectacular catches. He might be the best spectacular catcher in this draft class. But I don't think that warranted a first-round pick, in my opinion. I do not think that this pick was now. It could bite me because it's San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But I was shocked that they went him right there, because there was other wide receivers on the board that I would have taken over him. I mean, he was not in my first round. He wasn't in my second round, and he was in my third round. That's where Pearsall was for me, and he got taken at the end of the first round. You can realistically say this was a second round pick because it's one pick away. Another team picks right behind him, and then that's it. It's the second round. But man, I'm not a fan of that pick. And also the wide receivers that they got, it's like, what are we doing here?
Mm-hmm.
And the talks about potentially letting Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel go, it's like, those are the guys that turn it on in the playoffs. I mean, for me, I'm an NFC fan. I'm Dallas Cowboys fan. I'm like, let those guys go. Go to the AFC. You know what I mean? Please go to the AFC. I know what they're trying to do, and if Parcells kind of develops more, he can't develop his spectacular catching anymore. He needs to develop his route running a lot, and he's not that big of a burner. So I don't see a ton of separation coming off the line of scrimmage there. I'm really interested to see how Ricky holds up against press man coverage because I'm not sure he's going to be able to get those hands loose. I think this is primarily a slot receiver. And in the first round, I'm not sure. That was a bit of a head scratcher for me. Then out of Florida State in the second round, pick 32, they take Renardo Green, the cornerback. Third round, pick 23, they take Dominique Pooney, the offensive tackle out of Kansas. Fourth round, pick 24, they take Malik Mustafa, the safety out of Wake Forest. I nailed that name, by the way. I've been messing up the other ones, but I nailed that one. And then some more guys. I'm going to be honest with you, Tanner. This is one of the worst drafts I've seen in a while, in my opinion. So I'm going to give the San Francisco 49ers a D.
Wow, a D. I mean, it's hard. It's hard with this roster. You know what I mean? Like the roster is so stacked. It's like, where are the holes? So at this point, I think I would have expected them just to go completely best player available, or maybe even try to incorporate some trades, maybe get some, get a little bit higher up in the first or second round and trying to get yourself, another real big star that you can put on this offense that can maybe catapult you into a Super Bowl because, the last two times you haven't been able to win. So I don't know. Maybe Ricky Pearsall, maybe he does it for you. Maybe he's that gem that everyone's kind of like, moving past. But in my opinion, I didn't think he was the best receiver on the board, and I didn't think that he is the guy that's going to go in there and change a franchise, especially like you said with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk already being staples in that offense. Maybe he can learn from him. Maybe Deebo's on out the door. Maybe he's on his way out, and this is kind of his replacement. That's their plan. But I don't know. I kind of wanted them to draft BPA. Just go and see who's the best guy that's available that's going to help our team win right now, because they're in a win right now. They just made it to the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy's on a rookie contract. You have to make the use of that. So I think that I don't know. It's kind of confusing because they drafted a bunch of positions that, in my opinion, were not the best player available or position of need. It kind of just looked like they were just like throwing, spinning a wheel, like, all right, let's get that guy. But I'm gonna give him a C. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think that they like this kid when Ricky, and they traded up for Ronaldo Green out of Florida State, who had a very good season. So it's not my favorite draft, out of all the ones that we've looked at so far, but I think it's warranted a C. I think that, hopefully these guys can go up in their system and maybe they like these guys a ton. Maybe this is, in their eyes, the best draft. So I don't know, but I'm going to go with the C.
Okay. Well, hey, we can disagree on stuff. That's always fun. Tampa Bay. Okay, Bucks. Okay, Bucks. Round 1, pick 26, they take Graham Barton, the center out of Duke. That was shocking to me. I thought that Graham Barton I had him ranked below Frazier out of West Virginia, which if you still listen with us, he got taken by a previous team in the second round. So this clearly was the 49ers saying, look, I think their last center, if I'm not mistaken, was that dude Jensen.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that guy?
Yeah, he was disgusting.
He looked like a bale of hay. And he just ran over people. He was like a corn-fed, get out of my way, red hair, main back. That guy was awesome. They take Graham Barton. That's not the same player. It is not. He has not vicious hands like him. Point of attack with Jensen. I mean, he shoved your head into the dirt if you gave him the chance. Graham Barton's not more of a finesse center, which is kind of crazy to say in my opinion, but not a bad pick and a definite position of need, but a bit of a shock there. Then Chris Braswell, the edge out of Alabama, falls almost to the third round. At pick 25, they take him. Tyke Smith, the safety out of Georgia, third round, pick 26. That's kind of exactly right where I thought he was going to go. Jalen McMillan, the wide receiver out of Washington, goes round 3, pick 29. They trade to get Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan. This Washington team was stacked. By the way, they finished number 2 with most prospects taken in the NFL draft. If you were listening to the live stream, I said they might finish between 2 and 4. Keep listening to us. Sometimes we nail this stuff. Then in round 4, Bucky Irving's just kind of chilling.
That's wild.
And the Bucks are like, we'll take him. We'll take him. Then in the 6th round, they take Elijah Kine, the offensive guard out of UTEP. That was a fifth round guard for me, and he gets it almost at the end of the, or not at the end of the 6th, more kind of middle beginning of the 6th, but value pick there. And then Devin Culp, the tight end out of Washington in the 7th round, who I'm not going to lie, I don't have a ton of tape on him, but another Washington Husky taken. Buccaneers, hats off. I give you a B plus. Honestly, if you would have taken Frazier instead of Barton there, I would have given you an A. But that's kind of the only reason I'm not jumping them up in the A category. But Tampa Bay, hats off, great draft. What do you got, Tanner?
I completely agree. I'm gonna go with. I'll go with B plus. I'll go with B plus. I think it's a good draft. I think, given the situation, you need a center you need a future franchise center, and they go Graham Barton in the 1st round. I don't think he's a bad pick at all. He's obviously a 1st round pick. And I think he obviously deserved to be up there. Maybe not exactly in that position, but you can argue. But they got their center, they got their guy of the future. That's who they wanted, and I think that's who they were going to go with, regardless of who kind of fell. They were going to go with the center. So, when it comes to the other picks too, I really love the Bucky Irving pick, and I want to, that's like the big pick in my opinion out of this draft. That is, not obviously Graham Barton, just because this past season you saw with Rachaad White, he was just a horse. Like, they were relying on him so much, and especially in the second half of the season, they started, really running the ball more and really just kind of leaning into that run game. And if you had Rachaad White in fantasy, in my opinion, he was kind of like a diamond in the rough, a little needle in a haystack, a gem, almost, because nobody really talked about the Bucks running game. It's like, yeah, they got Baker, they got Mike Williams, or Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin, and all these guys, and it's just like, they're going to be throwing the ball, yes, but Rachaad White was very, very good. So in my opinion, Bucky Irving coming in to kind of get the load off of Rachaad White, because he was that number 1 guy, and there wasn't really a number 1B. There was a number 2, and they didn't really run him too much. So it's going to be really awesome to see him and Rachaad White in the same backfield, just getting back-to-back carries. So I think that running game is going to get even better this season, and I think it's going to put take a lot of pressure off of Baker, a lot of pressure off of that passing game, and it's going to give them the ability to play action and do all these kind of fun things with all these super good receivers. I mean, go back and look at Cleveland when they had Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. You know what I mean? 2 very different backs, and they were play actioning all the time with Baker. And in that season where they made the playoffs, that's all they did. They were just letting the run develop itself, and the pass came with it. So I think this is a really good pick. Like I said, I'm going to go with a B plus with the overall draft for the Bucks, and I think they got a lot better. And I was like, dang, that's pretty impressive. I like these picks a lot.
Yeah, the Bucks nailed it in this draft. Jumping to the Tennessee Titans, round 1, pick 7. They take the offensive tackle out of Alabama, which was I take it back. Michael Penix Jr. was not the first head scratcher. This definitely was the first head scratcher for me. J.C. Latham, once again, offensive tackle from Alabama, taken there at pick 7. I thought that there were better guys on the board. I kind of honestly forgot about this pick because the draft happened a couple weeks ago at this point. But I was pretty shocked at that one as well. I thought that, like I said, Talise Fuaga, also the offensive tackle out of Penn State, would have been another guy that I would have slotted in there. But no, they took J.C. Latham. That was their guy. And you can't really argue about an offensive tackle from Alabama. There's been a ton of really good ones. And it's kind of more NFL ready than pretty much every other program with Nick Saban being there. Not anymore, but some of these guys still have Nick Saban under their belt. But then in the 2nd round, they take T'Vondre Sweat, the defensive tackle out of Texas, which was a controversial pick because T'Vondre Sweat, unfortunately, it was a DWI or DUI, but right before the draft. It always happens. One player gets in trouble right before the draft, and it was a Texas defensive tackle. I thought that may have making him fall to the 3rd round, but nope. Tennessee Titans stick there in the 2nd round and take him. I didn't have T'Vondre Sweat as a 2nd round defensive tackle, or early 2nd round defensive tackle. I definitely had him more in the late 2nd, and that's almost on a good day. Really, I had him in the early 3rd round. So another kind of head scratcher there for me. And then Cedric Gray, the linebacker out of North Carolina, they don't go again until the 4th round. So they only had 2 picks in the first 3 rounds. And then in the 5th round, they take who they trade to get pick 11, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., the cornerback out of Louisville. And then the last guy I want to hit is Jaquan Jackson, the wide receiver out of Tulane, who's in the 6th round, who I think has a shot to make this team. But J.C. Latham, Tavondre Sweat, Cedric Gray, I think all of those picks were a little bit too far. I think it was a bit of a reach. The Titans clearly had their guys, and that's who they went for, and that was their draft strategy. But I'm not the biggest fan of this draft. I like that they literally got almost every single position to need that they had.
Mm-hmm.
So for that thing, I will never jump a team down to a D. But I'll give this team a solid C, and it's a solid C. It's not a C minus because they took pretty much every single position and need they needed. But I think that every single player that they took, there was a better player available at that position. So C for me for the Tennessee Titans. Tanner, what do you got?
I think maybe I agree with most of that, except maybe I do like the Tavondre Sweat pick. I think that was a good pick. I think that he had been outstanding this past year, and I think that because of the incident that happened, right before the draft, like you said, his draft stock can go down. But I think he still deserves to be, a higher, maybe a second, first round player, because of his abilities on the field. So I think that maybe could they have waited a little longer? Yeah, but he's sitting there. It's a position of need, and I think he's going to greatly improve that defensive line. So I do really like that pick, just standing out of all of them. I'll give him a C+, and I don't dislike the J.C. Latham pick. I think that they added some, the guy that they wanted on the offensive line. And from what we've seen, offensive linemen are kind of hit or miss in the first round. You're going to either the guy that's supposed to be really good is really good, or he's he's just not that great. So it's like it's kind of hit or miss when it comes to these offensive linemen. In the first round specifically, either he's going to be like a Tristan Wirfs or a Jedrick Wills, so it's just going to be like one of those kind of situations. So, don't dislike the first two picks at all. I really don't. And Cedric Gray out of North Carolina, that's where it starts getting into the rough a little bit, where it's like, okay, you're not picking very high. Given the situation, I'll give him a C+. I think that they deserve that. But I don't know. They haven't really done a whole ton in this offseason. They brought in a bunch of guys, but not a lot of the guys are, superstars. They got in Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, but like they're good, but like, are they really going to transform your franchise? You know what I mean?
Also, to hit on that point, you let a guy like AJ Brown walk and you pay Calvin Ridley more money. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And they have 3 quarterbacks that they've recently drafted that none of them have started. So I don't think times are very bright for the Tennessee Titans. That's me. And oh, by the way, their workhorse, yeah, Derrick Henry's not there anymore.
Yeah,
He got them a lot of wins.
It's Tony Pollard.
I think the Titans are going to be. I'm going to say this right now. I think the Titans are going to be in contention next year for a top 5 pick.
I think it's possible. I mean, they're completely changed the way that their offense works. Like I said, with Tony Pollard going in there, they can't just run the ball every play. They can't be that physical kind of run game that they wanted to be previously. And maybe them drafting that offensive lineman is trying to become a different style of team. Maybe some more West Coast kind of team with Will Levis and just quick passing, stuff like that. But it's not the Titans' identity. It hasn't been for the past couple of years. So it's going to be interesting to see how they change it up and how they continue to do things with this new regime in Tennessee that we're starting to see. So it's not the best. It's not the worst. They've got some playmakers, but a lot of these kind of moves just overall in their offseason have kind of been like, that's good, but you know what I mean? So that's pretty much it on Tennessee.
I think Tony Pollard is a fantasy must because he's the only player on that Tennessee Titans team that's going to continually get as much on the run game and in the pass game. And, I get the Calvin Ridley thing, but I don't know. For me, I had Calvin Ridley in a lot of fantasy leagues last year. I watched every game of his, and he's either there or he's not there. It's one of the two.
And that's with a number 1 receiver in Christian Kirk that is also on the other side of him too. So, put that in consideration when he is the only one there, in my opinion. I think that he was, he kind of excelled. He was kind of that guy. But like you said, even in those situations, it was kind of a hit or miss. It was like, okay, is he going to show up today? I don't know. Is it going to be, Christian Kirk's replacement over there? I think I don't remember what receiver they had, but it was just like, all right, he's gonna go get 3 touchdowns today. So I mean, maybe that's Trevor Lawrence, maybe that's Calvin Ridley. You don't really know, but I don't know. Their receiver core is Tyler Boyd, DeAndre Hopkins, and now Calvin Ridley. So it's good on paper, but maybe this would have been a much better receiving core 3-4 years ago. So I don't know. It's one of those situations. But moving on to Washington.
Oh man. Oh, oh man. This is another team in the NFC East that had one heck of a draft and probably not the best draft because I think the Eagles had the best draft. Um, Giants had a pretty solid draft as well. Cowboys, we will see. And then the Washington Commanders to finish it off for these part two draft grades. First round, pick 2, Jaden Daniels. They don't mess up and take Drake May. Sorry. Round 2, pick 4, they take Jairson Newton, the defensive tackle out of Illinois. Oh, oh my. Oh my. Okay. Then Mike Skorinsky, the cornerback out of Michigan. Okay. In the second round. Ben Sinnott, the tight end out of Kansas State. That was a bit of a shocker for me. I thought the tight end out of the University of Texas was a really, really good tight end. He was my number 2 tight end. This is my number 4 tight end. But I had him slotted in the third round, almost third round. Don't think that's a bad pick. Brandon Coleman, the offensive guard out of TCU. That's right where I thought he was going to go. Another McCaffrey is in the NFL. Luke McCaffrey out of Rice, the wide receiver. That's right. Christian McCaffrey, related to him. I don't know if he's going to be as good. Good luck. Then you got Jordan McGahee, the linebacker out of Temple, who I had a 4th round grade on. Then a 5th round, they traded to get him Dominique Hampton, the safety out of Washington. Then 7th round, Javonte John Baptiste, the edge out of Notre Dame. The first 5 picks of this draft, you can really say 6 with McCaffrey, depending upon how big of a McCaffrey fan you are. They nailed him. They absolutely nailed him. And Jaden Daniels is a guy that was the pick there. Number 1 and number 2, I think were pretty much locked. And the draft really started at number 3, in my opinion. Now we go back and look. Number 3 was pretty much unlocked the whole time. So was number 4 with Marvin Harrison Jr. The draft really started at number 5 with the Chargers when they took a 6'8", 300-plus pound offensive lineman out of Notre Dame, Joe Alton. By the way, if you haven't seen the picture, please go look at Chargers. Please go look at their minicamp and watch this kid. I know on draft night we were shocked they didn't get a wide receiver, the Chargers, but my goodness, they got a left tackle that's going to be there forever. Anyway, this is Washington's time. Jaden Daniels, A+. Newton, A+. That was the second defensive tackle on my board, and he got taken right there. And not really a position to need because you got some dogs in there, but still solid. Skorinsky, the cornerback out of Michigan, I saw him mocked as high as the first round before. So I'm going to give that a great pick. Ben Sinnott, the tight end out of Kansas State. Like I said, he was my 4th tight end, but still around early, I think is okay for him. Brandon Coleman, the guard there, then Luke McCaffrey right there. I gotta give Washington an A. I gotta give him an A minus. I'll give him an A minus. Not gonna give him an A. I'm gonna give him an A. Screw it. Washington gets an A. Everyone gets an A. Just unbelievable. Just an unbelievable draft. Complete new ownership group going into Washington. You were kind of really interested as a Cowboys fan to see how they were going to draft and what they were going to do. I think they did pretty good, and I think Washington in New York is going to be a lot closer than they were last year.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a very, very good draft. Obviously those first 3 picks are kind of the big ones. I mean, when you have 3 second-round picks that you do use, it's pretty impressive. They traded for 2 of them, and then they still had 2 threes left over. So it's like, all right, we're gonna have how many is that? 1, 2, 6 picks in the first 3 rounds is double of what a lot of other teams have, and maybe even triple of what some teams have. So they're gonna get a lot of these chances. They got a lot of the positions of need that they really, really needed. I think tight end, like you were saying, with the kid out of Kansas State, it's like, yes, you could have gone the Texas tight end there, but at that point it's a tight end. They're going to get the guy that they want to get, who's going to work best with this Jaden Daniels system. So I don't know. I really like that pick. I don't think they needed it, but the Newton pick out of Illinois was amazing, because they can just, it's just Washington. They just draft defensive linemen like nobody's business. And then they just restock and reload, get these contracts off, and bring new guys in. So I think he'll be just fine. I think that corner was a huge need, I think, coming into this draft. With the kid out of Michigan, is Sam Rinstill. I'm not very good at that name, but I think that's going to help them a ton. Obviously Michigan won the national championship, and they were going against a Washington team that was pretty dang good. So a lot with, like what you said, with a lot of receivers, and they locked up a lot of them. So man, give me that. I like it a lot. I'm gonna give them B plus. I'm gonna give them a B plus, just because I don't know. With I would have, I don't know. I would have, 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 I It's tough. I would have liked to see a receiver come off the board a little bit earlier for this team. I get it. They have Terry McLaurin, and I get it. They have Jahan Dotson, but after that, it's really a free for all. And maybe Luke McCaffrey, maybe he's that guy that's going to step up as that number 3, be that guy. But I thought there were a lot of good receivers, especially in the second and third rounds of this draft, that could potentially become, future starters that you could have possibly paired with, Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, and maybe even surpassed both of them. So I thought there was a lot of talent. And I don't know. Luke McCaffrey wasn't the direction that I personally would have gone in when it comes to these receivers that were still on the board, especially since some of those early first round or early second round picks were receivers that we really didn't expect to go to there. So there were a lot of really good players left over. But that being said, they still got a lot of bang for their buck. So I'm going to give them a B+.
And that is it with the NFL draft grades part 2 edition. Now we're jumping to new NFL quarterback contracts. We only got one to talk about. Jared Goff signed a 4-year, $212 million extension, and that comes out to about $53 million a year. Tanner, thoughts?
He deserved it. I mean, I think he was, he's the quarterback of the future for Detroit fans. They got to an NFC Championship game that they arguably should have won, depending on how you look at it. But I think that he's slot right in there. He's become that city's quarterback. And the biggest chant that Detroit has now is Jared Goff. So I think they're going to be singing his praises for years to come. And I think he's going to do just fine. He's been that guy for the past couple years, whether you have kind of seen it in fantasy or have seen it just on, in NFL games and action, stuff like that. But this year he kind of proved it. He had a loaded roster. He's like, yeah, I can be that guy. I can get the Lions to an NFC Championship game and do what they haven't done for, however many years. So deserved it. Completely deserved it. And with the salary cap going up, it's not, a crazy deal for 4 years for $53 million. Dak's probably going to get signed to a deal that's higher than that. There's a couple other quarterbacks that are probably going to get signed to a deal that's higher than that. So it's not, it with all the rookie contracts that they do have on their roster too, it's not too big of a deal. Maybe in 4 years, or maybe 2 or 3, they'll start regretting it. But I don't know. I like the contract. I think it was well deserved.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really argue about anything in the playoffs. I was not necessarily the biggest believer in the Lions this past season. I kind of thought it was going to take them one more season to get where they got, but they got there a lot quicker. And their rookie picks that they took were an impact immediately with Gibbs. And then you got the linebacker as well that they jumped up to take out of Wyoming last year as well, and he played a ton of minutes and played very well too. So the Lions are there in the NFC, and they are now one of the teams to beat in the NFC behind the Lions. And, you can put the Eagles in there. You can also put the Cowboys in there. But I think they're definitely one of the teams to beat now. And like you said, I completely agree. I think it's deserving. $53 million a year is absolutely insane. I have a fantasy trophy that I won, not too long ago when it was a joke about Dak Prescott making $40 million a year. Now we've got Jared Goff making 53, and he's not even on the same team that he got drafted by. But that's absolutely insane how also real quick, you can just change a situation for 2 quarterbacks and their trajectory just continues to skyrocket.
It's awesome.
I mean, Stafford, Paffy Pafford, he could have stayed in Detroit and been completely fine. Goff had to get out of LA. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like he had to get out of LA. And so you put him to Detroit and it's like, I don't know if I can really put all my chips in on Goff, you know, but then you see that connection and you're like, okay, Goff, you nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. And he deserves all of that money. When you get to an NFC Championship game and you lose against that good of a 49ers team, it's like, okay, and also you weren't going to win in the Super Bowl anyway. You're playing Mahomes. You're going to lose. If
you never know. They beat him earlier in the season.
Yeah, I know, but you always got to rile up Detroit fans a little bit. It's fun to do.
It's true.
No, but Detroit, that's a team that is, like I said, a team to beat in the NFC, and now they got their quarterback locked up for the next 4 years, and you don't got to worry about it. You briefly mentioned it, Dak Prescott. That's a quarterback that's up for a contract. Same with Trevor Lawrence. There's a lot of guys, Jordan Love, that are going to be up for a contract that are going to be probably making more than that $53 million. Dak for sure. Mm-hmm. Who knows what Trevor Lawrence is going to make? Who knows what Jordan Love is going to make? But we're going to talk about quarterbacks a whole lot more next week. Tanner, I think it's about time to move on to these sports that we have not gotten to mention because we've been so invested in the NFL draft. Next year, by the way, we're going to be even more invested in the NFL draft, and we're probably going to do some more. Not probably, we will do some more episodes covering specifically the NFL draft. The part 2 we won't make you wait a week this time next year. We promise we'll put all of them out, all going in one. But Tanner's the basketball guy, and it's time for Tanner's Corner 3 segment, the NBA playoffs. Tanner, please.
It is the NBA playoffs. Surprisingly, it's the first time we've talked about these playoffs at all on this podcast, which is kind of nuts. But I'm going to rapid through some of the first round matchups because we are in the second round now. And the second round is almost done. It's, pretty close to being done. So I'm going to go through these first round matchups and just, say very, very little bit, and then once we're done, you can see what your thoughts are on. But starting in the West, we got, Thunder Pelicans. I think that was a big one. Zion's not playing. No surprise. Thunder winning 4. Going on to the next one. Clippers Mavs. Kawhi's not playing. In my opinion, that was kind of a no surprise. Mavericks, and they won in 6. But I think Kawhi played one of those games and he played pretty well. But you got to have all your stars on the floor at the same time. Paul George, Russell Westbrook couldn't get it done. And James Harden, that they played pretty well, granted, but Mavs are another beast, as we can see in this, the next series with the Thunder and Mavericks. But Timberwolves Suns, no surprise there. You can say, KD is, old, washed, whatever. Devin Booker, washed, whatever. But I just think Timberwolves were just very, very good team. They got, I think, 4 awards on that starting lineup in the NBA awards this past. The NBA awards after the season. Nuggets Lakers, in my opinion, that was no surprise. Lakers, although they are a good team, it's the end of an era with LeBron James. I think Anthony Davis played phenomenally against Joker, but you need a little bit more help. I think that the big role players that kind of stepped up in the playoffs last season weren't really stepping up that much this season. So you didn't really see a lot.
And they were gone.
Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, all these guys that you just kind of want to see to step up in the series didn't really, in my opinion. So also the Nuggets are just a really good team, and they kind of got a little bit unlucky on some of those ending possessions that kind of fell to the Nuggets, and Jamal Murray is a beast. But heading over to the East, Celtics and Heat. Jimmy Butler did not play in that series. Not a big surprise, but the Heat took a game off him, and, surprisingly, they looked pretty good against the Celtics, even though Jimmy wasn't playing. Cavs and Magic. This is the only series that went to 7 in the first round, and it was a really good one. It was a very back-and-forth battle, but the Cavs, they kind of... Donovan Mitchell did his thing first couple games. They went over to Orlando. Paolo did his thing. Suggs did his thing. Wagner did his thing. Like all these guys, they got a bunch of young guys on that team that are just, they play out of their minds. So I really like this Orlando squad, and I think they put up a huge fight against Cleveland. I mean, it seemed like in every single match in this series, Paolo was just draining them, just be like, all right, yeah, we're still in this thing. Come on, boys. And then he just kind of bring them back in every game. But Cavs won that in 7, and I think it was the only reason was because they had home field advantage. That's the only reason. They were the higher seed, and they played better at home, and Donovan Mitchell was a beast. So he was not going down in 7, especially in the first round. But Bucks Pacers, Giannis goes out in this series before the playoffs, and that is a huge whiff on their part, in my opinion. I just think that Bucks go out in the first round. I think in 2 consecutive playoffs. What's happening? They fired their head coach in the middle of the season for Doc Rivers. They lose in the first round. Granted, like I said, Giannis wasn't playing. Damian Lillard didn't play for a portion of that series, but Damian Lillard, as we've seen in Portland, cannot carry a team, to a championship on his own. So you need a little bit more pieces in the NBA. And I think that while he played pretty well, I think Chris Middleton stepped up. Pacers are just a really good team. They're a very, very good offensive team. I have a podcast episode on here where I talk specifically about why they're very good and why Tyrese Halliburton is just an excellent facilitator of the basketball. You can go take a listen to that a couple episodes back, but yeah, that Pacers team is nasty, and I think they're a lot better than that 6th seed implies. But Knicks 76ers barely scraped in, and they're the 7th seed. They got in through the play-in, and it's just it's not the Embiid year anymore. I think that Tyrese Maxey had the fantastic series. I think that Embiid was, he was good. He put up a lot of points, but, down the stretch, I think he was kind of a liability, in some of those games. And I think that the Knicks were just taking advantage of every single situation that they had. Jalen Brunson is a beast. DiVincenzo is a beast. Josh Hart is a beast. Like in any single game, any one of those guys can put up 30. And on most of them, Jalen Brunson puts up at least 40. So it's kind of hard to compete with Jalen Brunson and this other team that just goes off pretty much every other week. But yeah, man, those were the first round matchups. Now we have we'll start in the East. Celtics and Cavs, which that series is 3-1. Pacers and Knicks, and that is 3-2. Sorry, the Celtics-Cavs one is 3-1 for Boston. That's a very important distinction. Pacers and Knicks lead at 3-2. That's a very close series. And then you go over to the West, and then you got Thunder Mavs. That series is tied at 2. And then you got Timberwolves Nuggets, and that series is 3-2. So, Chad, do you have any comments on the first round matchups?
I mean, I think a lot of, the first round extremely quickly, because it's been a little bit since the first round has happened. Very, very quick comment. There was a lot of injuries, and pretty much every single matchup went the exact way I thought it was going to go before we even started to see the NBA playoffs. I did not think the Pelicans were going to beat the Thunder. I did not think the Mavericks were going to beat the Clippers. I thought the Suns had a better shot to beat the Timberwolves. I didn't think they were going to get swept. I can tell you that. I thought the Suns were going to put up more of a fighting chance. Lakers win one game. Okay, I can absolutely see the Lakers stealing one game. You don't have Jimmy Butler playing against the Celtics. Tatum in the playoffs. Good freaking luck. Then Cavs Magic go to 7, like you said. Easily the best series. And Jalen Brunson come out, and I can't think of the name of the Mavs player that you just mentioned, but it was his coming out show as well, his party. What's the Mavs, or sorry, not the Mavs, the Magic star player?
Oh, Paolo Banchero.
Thank you. Thank you. He played amazing.
Yeah,
then Antetokounmpo goes down the regular season, like you said. Pacers destroy him 4-2. Then Knicks beat 76ers 4-2. And if you don't have Embiid playing at 100%, he didn't, and he wasn't that whole series, you're going to lose, and you're the 76ers. It's just that simple. And it kind of sucks for Embiid because now it's really starting to come into that conversation of him. And I mean, Zion is injury prone is already there. That label's already there. But Embiid, it's like, man, if he's healthy, he's solid. But if he's not healthy, it's like you said, it's not the Embiid that we're used to seeing. And you can't dominate Indiana like everybody thought he was going to, and he just didn't. But also wasn't 100%. So I can't really put that all on Embiid. Second round matchups, you pretty much, all these teams, like we said, we kind of knew they were going to go. You started in the East with Boston and Cleveland. You're the basketball guy. 3-1 that series. That seems not a shock to me. That doesn't seem a shock. I know Donovan Mitchell's, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he's playing the next game because he's sick. So I think Boston's going to wrap this thing up in 5 games.
Yeah, I think Boston does wrap it up. I think that they're just offensively too good. It's just even watching this series, and yes, Donovan Mitchell, I don't believe that he is playing. I don't think that Jared Allen is playing. I don't think Karis LeVert is playing in this upcoming game because they've just been having injuries. Jared Allen, and it's I think it's important to mention too in that Orlando series, Jared Allen, he goes out, and they just don't look like the same team after that. I don't remember what game it was specifically, but Orlando kind of went on a run and they won a couple games after that. So Jared Allen is a very, very big part of this Cleveland team, and he has been all season. In my opinion, Donovan Mitchell, obviously, he's number one. He's the reason this team has made it this far in the playoffs. He's carried them on their back. But Jared Allen during the regular season, he was that guy. He's that guy that you can rely on in the paint. And in his absence, I think Evan Mobley has played pretty well, his counterpart. But when you don't have those two dominating towers down there over in the paint, it's like, what are we supposed to do? Because Evan Mobley, he's good, but he's not Jared Allen good. He can play defensively well, but, only for so long. So it's like, it's the thing that made that paint game so good for the Cleveland Cavaliers is because they had those two guys that they could kind of, either or they could put one in, they could put both in, they could put, some substitutional guys in here and there. But my opinion, whenever Jared Allen went out, that series against Orlando became a lot harder, and they started exposing Cleveland in the paint a lot more. And you're seeing it a ton in this Boston series. There's just not, you can't really say that that's an excuse because Boston does have Porzingis out as well, a big guy in the paint. So it's like, they have an injury there. You guys have an injury here. But at least for those first 3 games, I think that they were not on even playing field, but I think that they had a very similar situation going on. And Boston was just a better team. I think that they were shooting better, they were playing better, except for Donovan Mitchell. I think Donovan was a force to be reckoned with and has been throughout these entire playoffs and this past season when he's played. But that's the big thing. When he's played, when he's not on the court, this team is not as good at all. Like they just do not generate offensive points nearly as well.
Well, the point spread for tonight's game is 15.5. Or I don't know if it's tonight's game, but the next game is 15.5 for Boston. I mean, that when it's that high in an NBA playoff game, usually you see 4, 5, 3, and 2.5, 4.5. That I get it. I know Vegas. And then 15.5 for Boston in Cleveland. I mean, that if it's not over, it's going to be real surprising if it goes to game 6. And like you mentioned with Allen going out, a point that I think that's a really good point to make is like when he went out, like that offense completely changed.
Yep.
It completely changed. And it's like, yes, Porzingis is a guy that is absolutely a guy that eats minutes and a guy that plays, but I think he's not the unicorn of old. He's kind of fallen off a little bit. And like Boston, they're running through Tatum. They're completely running through Tatum. And like you said, Cleveland's Tatum is Donovan Mitchell. And when he's out, I mean, come on. You know what I mean? Come on. And then you named 2 other guys. So it's like, I think, Cleveland, it's like you had a good run in the first round. That was a hell of a series. Best series of the first round.
Mm-hmm.
Second round, not the best series.
It's tough. It's a tough matchup going up against Boston, especially with Donovan Mitchell out. But, Darius Garland in that last game, I think he played pretty well. But it's just, he hasn't been enough. He hasn't done enough in this series. He was a high round pick or a high selection for this Cleveland Cavaliers team. And I think that he's played well in these playoffs, but he's kind of been that number 2 to Donovan Mitchell pretty much his whole, every time that he's given that opportunity. He hasn't really stepped up to be like, all right, this is my game. I'm going to show up and I'm going to put up a bunch of points, or I'm going to, make a bunch of clutch shots. And like he has made these clutch shots, but it's just inconsistent. One game it's like, dang, he's on tonight. But it's like the other game, it's like, man, he really isn't on tonight. So it's like, you just want to see that consistency from a role player in this offense who has had a lot of time in this offense and has, time to learn it. And in my opinion, this was his time to shine. This past game against, Boston, he played well, but it wasn't enough. I just think maybe if Jared Allen's in that game, maybe it's different because you can kind of control the paint more. But, it's just, Boston is just so good. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, it's just, it goes through those 2 guys. And if one of them's hitting, the other one's hitting, so it's hard to keep these guys contained, especially on the 3-point line when they don't have Porzingis in. But, they can do many different things. That's why they're the Boston Celtics. That's why they're the best team in the NBA. So I think it's a tough matchup for Cleveland given the situation, but I think Boston's going to take this in 5. Cleveland, good run, but Donovan Mitchell is not here to save you, and they're going to have to get some more guys. Coming into this season, I thought Cleveland was one of the deeper teams. Coming into this playoffs, I thought Cleveland was one of the deeper teams, but you look at it now and it's starting to not be true. So I don't know, man. We'll move on to the Pacers and Knicks series because I think this one is actually really entertaining as well. But you have any other thoughts on that Cleveland and Celtics series?
Boston in 5.
Boston in 5. But on to Pacers Knicks. This probably wasn't most people's picks for this round because 76ers, Joel Embiid, former MVP, they got to do well, right? They're the 7 seed. They're going up against the Knicks. It's the New York Knicks. Jalen Brunson. Who else? Well, they got a lot of other people. They got a lot of other people. I think that Valanciunas plays well. I think Josh Hart has played really well. This Knicks team is exciting. I think it's a very similar situation like you do have with that Cleveland team where it's like Donovan Mitchell and everyone else. But I think Jalen Brunson is not the only guy on this team. You really, really look at it, and obviously they've had some injuries, but it's like they've played really, really well, and they've had very, very good spurts in these playoffs. And Indiana is a very hard team to play against because they have a lot of guys. Siakam, they got Obi Toppin, who's over there as well. Obviously Tyrese Halliburton is disgusting and he's played really well. But I mean, this series is 3-2. It could go either way in this next game, and we could be going to 7. So it's like the Knicks have had their games, the Pacers have had their games. It's kind of been like all right, who's going to get out to the biggest lead first, kind of game. So both teams have a very, very good ability to score. Defense in this series has been hit or miss, but this is, if you want an offensive series, right here. Right here. This is the one that you want to watch because Tyrese Halliburton has just been fantastic. Whether he's assisting, whether he's going to the driving to the bucket, whether he's shooting from three, he's just facilitating this entire Pacers team, and it's beautiful. I think that he's just done an absolutely like fantastic job of doing it throughout these playoffs and throughout this series. I mean, he took out the Bucks and it looked easy, and now they had a little bit of a slow start to this series, but Pacers look good, man. Pacers look really good, and they're 6th seed. But what is, it doesn't matter if you got to play Boston in the next series. We'll see. We'll see if anyone can stand up to that juggernaut. But both of these teams look really good.
They did, and they still do. And it's that series is 3-2 Knicks. A lot of people had the Knicks kind of winning that series a little bit easier than what they've done. I personally, as a a playoff basketball fan, I hope that Indiana wins the next game, so it goes to Game 7.
Oh yeah,
because anything can happen in any Game 7, and when you have scores like this on each team, all it takes is it to be one of those guys' night.
mm-hmm.
And just like Tanner said, Brunson from the Knicks. I mean, when you're scoring 40 in the playoffs, if a bench player comes out and scores 20, you probably win that game. You know what I mean? But then you have this Pacers team who is just so electric and so offensively driven and offensively minded and such a good coach team. It's just a really fun team to watch. And a 6 seed playing as well as they have has been awesome. But we'll see if New York can shut that series out. Now moving on to the West. Dude, the Dallas Mavericks and the Thunder. Take us away with that series, because my goodness, those have been good games.
Dallas Mavericks and the Oklahoma City Thunder. It doesn't get much more, star-studded than this. I really think that this is the matchup that's got, I think going into these playoffs, I think maybe the hottest team in the Oklahoma City Thunder. They steal away the 1 seed from the Nuggets, and they got a good, I say draw out of it. The Mavericks are a tough team. They've played really well through these playoffs. Luka has been dominant. I think Luka's played really well. I think their bench guys has also played well. Their non-starters have played well. And Kyrie, obviously. But the Thunder, I don't know, man. The Thunder just have so much talent and so much specialness. I don't know what it is, like pizzazz, extra little thing. Like, Shea's going to average 30 a game. We know that. He's going to do his thing, but at the end of the day, it's like, who are you going to have to match Shea? Well, I mean, Luka was up there in MVP voting too. He's pretty dang good. So you kind of have one-on-one on those guys. And then you kind of go down and it's like, who's going to stand up against Holmgren? Who's going to stand up against, some of the other guys that they got, like Jalen Williams, who's going to stand up against him? He could go off on any game. So it's good. It's been really, really good series. I think that Oklahoma, I think they're going to take this. I really do. I just think they're the better team.
Really?
I do. They've shown it all season. Dallas has shown flashes in the pan, and that's why they're, a 5 seed instead of like a 2 or a 3. But down the stretch, I think Oklahoma can definitely take this. It's just, can they live up to the moment? That's the big thing for me. This is a young team. We've talked about them a bunch. Can they excel in that moment? They took out the Pelicans in 4. It looked easy. It's been a little bit harder against the Mavericks. I think defensively they're a better team too. But I don't know. I think OKC has the firepower to end this series. But I'll give it. This could easily go to 7. But I will go OKC though.
I hope it goes to 7. And watching Luka and Kyrie in the playoffs is so fun. Dallas, it's clear they need one more. It's pretty clear that they need one more person that can help them there. But I mean, when you got Luka, I mean that is arguably him and Tatum for me are like. I mean, it's so hard because there's so many great young players in the NBA, but those guys are, if you're going to start a franchise, those are pretty close to number 1 and number 2 for me personally. Then, like you said, you got Shea at the Thunder, who's just absolutely dominating teams, and it's fun to watch. And then you've got, the Thunder sitting here, like you said, the number 1 seed, they steal it away from the Nuggets. And it's like, these guys aren't supposed to be here.
Mm-hmm.
They're not supposed to be here yet. They still have like 20 something draft picks in these next couple drafts. Like, They're not supposed to be here. They're still supposed to be in the rebuilding. But this is what happens when you hit on every one of your early round draft picks.
Yeah.
This is what happens.
Mhm.
A team can literally get transformed and changed away. And when I say early draft picks, they were picking real early. They were picking real early in the first round. If you're not picking in the top 5, top 10, even top 10 is kind of a stretch. Top 5 picks in the NBA draft, that's a whole lot different than the NFL draft, the NHL draft. The NBA draft is 2 rounds. That's it. And the first round is guaranteed. The second round's not. So it is a completely different ball game. No pun intended there. But the Thunder, man, if they win and make it to the conference finals, this front office, every single person needs a massive raise. And then if they get past, the next series we're going to talk about, I mean, my goodness, if the Thunder beat the Mavs and beat the Timberwolves or the Nuggets and make it to the finals, that's a successful season. If they lose against the Dallas Mavericks right now, in my opinion, I think it's a successful season. But if you would have told me at the beginning of the season this team would be playing in the conference semifinals, they are a number 1 seed, and they are tied 2 games apiece against Luka and Kyrie Irving, I would have said you're crazy. But it's the NBA playoffs, and like you said, when a team gets hot at the end of the season, they can go a long way. So take us to our last matchup in your pick for this one.
It's tough, man. This is a series and a half. It's been,
This has been my favorite one.
It has. I think Minnesota, they go out to a commanding 2-0 lead, and they're like, we're here, we're Minnesota. And this Minnesota team is disgusting. Anthony Edwards, he's been singing praises of Michael Jordan's past, but I think on his own he is just kind of that guy. I think that he can take over a game and be like that. But the thing is, he's young. He's very young. So it's like, can he do that consistently in a playoff series, right after you win in 4 against the Suns? Like, obviously, yeah, we saw you do it against the Suns. It was very impressive. But can you do this against the defending champs? You know what I mean? And that was kind of when I think the Nuggets were like, all right, we are the defending champs. Let's figure out what the heck we're doing. And then in the next 3 games, they just show up. They just destroy Minnesota, and it's not really close. I mean, Jokic wins his 3rd MVP, and he just goes up and he kind of takes control over that series. But not to mention, though, I think Rudy Gobert, the defensive player of the year, going up against the most valuable player in Jokic, has been an absolutely amazing, super fun story to watch. And it's been back and forth, I think, but I think Jokic has kind of won these battles over and over, especially in these past couple games, because it's just, when Jokic starts controlling the paint, when he starts ripping them from 3, when it just looks like a video game out there, it's hard to stop him, especially when, defensively the Nuggets are a very good team and they can stop Anthony Edwards, which in my opinion is their biggest threat scoring. So it's like, if you have to rely on, these other guys, with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns to score, I think you're going to be in a good position. But if Anthony Edwards isn't doing much, kind of lock it up a little bit for the Nuggets. But the Nuggets have been coming on. It hasn't just been Jamal Murray and Jokic. It's been Aaron Gordon. He's been playing fantastically through these playoffs. He's been a great facilitator, and he's kind of that guy. They've been kind of locking up Jamal. They've been trying to lock up Jokic, but if Jamal Murray's not having his best series, who are they going to go to? It's going to be Michael Porter Jr. It's going to be Caldwell Pope. It's going to be, Aaron Gordon, these other guys that have experience now winning a championship. They know what they got to do. They know when they got to step up. So Aaron Gordon has gotten a lot better, and I think that he has been a major contributor in this series. I'm going to go with Denver. Experience is the key thing for me here. They've made it to a championship. They've won it. Jokic has 3 MVPs, and he shows up in the biggest situations, and we've seen that his entire career. So give me the Nuggets, man. I love the Timberwolves, and I think this will go to 7, but give me Jokic in a game 7, Jamal Murray in a game 7. Come on. Not to mention too, Timberwolves have they got a bunch of awards this year too with Rudy Gobert. I think Cat won an award. I think Naz Reid won an award for their bench player. I think their coach was a finalist for the coach of the year. So Rudy Gobert, Cat, these guys, hats off to you guys. And we'll see if you can win the series.
Nice. A couple couch warriors there. Yeah, I mean, this has been the most fun series to me, in my opinion. This is the one that I've been glued to and literally watched every second of every single game for this series. But you pretty much nailed it. If Ant's not getting 40, Then you got to give it up to Cat, because Cat has stepped up in the absence of Ant. But I mean, Anthony Edwards is 22. You know what I mean? I don't think a lot of folks expected him to. I don't think anybody expected the Minnesota Timberwolves to come out 2-0 and then drop the last three. You know what I mean? Like you see that this Denver team is a championship team. This is a team that has won a championship. This is a team that has been there, and this is a team that has done that. They didn't play through Jokic in game 1 because Anthony Edwards just destroyed the entire game plan because of how well he played. Game 2, pretty much the same. Game 3, that didn't happen. Jokic completely took over, and since then, he has been the Jokic, the MVP level Jokic. And Jamuri's been a little off. Like you said, it's okay. Aaron Gordon's going to step up and get there. So the Denver Nuggets are a little bit deeper, in my opinion, and a little bit more playoff experience too. So it's really hard for a Minnesota team to go and, do what they did in the first round to a team like the Suns. But this Minnesota team has surprised a lot of people, myself included. I hope it goes to a game 7 because, like I said, anything can happen in a game 7. And if Anthony Edwards drops 50, then maybe they win. You know what I mean? But if he doesn't, then it's probably Denver's series.
It's going to be up to Anthony Edwards. It's going to be what can he do in this game 6, when they play, like what can you become that guy? Can you shed off these nervous doubts, whatever, you lost the last 3, who cares? Can you force a game 7, and can you be that guy for the next 2 games? That is the big question, I think. And the other big question is if he's not putting up, like you said, 30, 35, 40, who's going to step up? Who's going to be that other guy? Mike Conley, he's day-to-day. He's been a good, very big part of this offense, but Anthony Edwards, he needs to take charge of the series. And like you said, he's young. Can he do that? Do we know? We know he can score. We know he can play really well, but can he consistently do that in the biggest moments? And that's kind of the big difference I see in this series. Like, yes, they're very, very talented and they're very close, in skill and all the things that they do with the Nuggets, but the Nuggets have those extra rotational guys that they kind of put in and they kind of continue to keep things rolling. Obviously it's not Jokic, it's not Jamal Murray every single play. That's why he's saying, like, Aaron Gordon, he's stepping up. Michael Porter Jr. steps up every single time he touches the ball. Like, he shoots, and it doesn't matter. That kid, he's got a confidence of a king. So it's like, can these rotational guys that come in, can they step up for the Minnesota Timberwolves? I think they can, but it's a thing of just like, will they? They've put together a very good roster. I think their paint game is disgusting with Gobert and Cat, but it's like they can't control the whole show, especially when Jokic is on the other side. So it's like, we need some extra help from you, Ant. And I think he's played very well, but we just need to see it again,
We'll see what happens with that series. Real fun one. Hope it goes to game 7. Jumping over to the NHL playoffs now. First round right now. Dallas takes out Vegas in 7 games. That was the biggest knockdown, drag-out series, just hard hockey. And Dallas goes on and defeats the Stanley Cup champions, moves on. The Jets and the Avalanche play. The Jets won game 1, then the Avalanche won the next 4. So the Avalanche move on to play the Stars in the second round, which we're going to hit. The Vancouver Canucks surprise everybody and take the Nashville Predators out in 6 games. Then the Oilers and the Kings. Oilers won the series in 5 games. That's no surprise there. So we have the Vancouver Canucks, the Edmonton Oilers that are playing in the second round. Eastern Conference now, we had the Florida Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Florida Panthers won it in 5. No surprise there. The Lightning, sorry, officially, the dynasty's probably over. Stamkos, at the end of this season, that's their longtime captain. Don't think he's signed to a contract, so we don't know what's going to happen there, and he's got to definitely take a pay cut if he wants to stay. But the Florida Panthers, this is a team that is a mean team, and they showed their meanness against Tampa and just dominated them. The Boston Bruins against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto.
What a series.
Oof. Yeah, oof. 7 games. Boston wins it at the end. A couple OT games in that series as well. The Leafs never had their star players all playing at the same time. Those 3 being Austin Matthews, John Tavares, and Mitch Marner. And, let me put in another star player, William Nylander as well. They were not all playing at the same time. They call him Willie Styles. William Nylander. Dude's a legend. He took like a post game press conference with like no shirt and his hair slicked back on the bench. I'm like, that's a freaking hockey player, man. He was injured. He comes back, has a massive impact, scores. Mitch Marner disappeared the entire series. No clue where he was. Still can't find him. Austin Matthews was hurt. The series comes back, gets a game-winning assist, and gets a goal as well. Toronto, we're going to hit this a lot more the next episode because, we're kind of already gone an hour and a half, so we don't want to stay for, 4 hours. Who knows? We could do it, right? But no, we're going to hit hockey big time next episode. Toronto, we got a lot of things to talk about. They already fired their head coach, and the owner had a press conference that was not calling out Mitch Marner, it was kind of sort of calling out Mitch Marner. So that Toronto team is going to completely change. Who knows what's going to happen over the offseason? Then you have the New York Rangers who get a 4-0 series win against the Capitals. Most boring series in the first round. The Rangers dominated them. Capitals shouldn't have been there. Sorry, Ovi. Hurricanes and the Islanders. Wow. If you're an Islanders fan,
I'm sorry.
We're not even going to go into that and make Islanders fans relive that because they should have won that series if you watch those games, and they just didn't, and they lost it in 5, which is insane. Late game collapses on pretty much every single game that they played. They were up and they just got destroyed at the end. Now, jumping to the round that we've actually been watching, Dallas leads the series against Colorado 3-1. Dallas is still favored in this series, but hence their star player is not going to be in for tonight's game. So I actually picked Colorado tonight, and I think that's going to be going to game 6. And then I think the Stars can take them out. But Tanner, this Avalanche series, I know this is the main series that you've been watching. So go ahead and take me away with what you've been seeing as we got to say, a new hockey fan. And I am appreciating the hell out of it.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we got the Madonna puck over there. You can barely see it. I'll give it a little bit more love. But you go back and you look at that Vegas series that Dallas play against, and it's just such a slugfest. It's just they have so much trouble getting the puck into Vegas's zone and actually creating good opportunities. And when they actually get it in there, they just miss their opportunities. And that was kind of the big thing about that series. And comparing it to this series, it's very similar, but I think Dallas has had a lot more chances. I think Dallas has had a lot more good scoring chances in this series. I think that they've been a little bit more lenient when it comes to when Dallas is in their zone. I think Dallas has been a little bit more comfortable in that area. But it's just their ability to stay in these games. I think that's the biggest thing. Dallas lost that game. I think it was game 1 because Colorado came back after a 3-goal lead and they lost it in overtime. And it was that should have been, more of a big situation. They could, this series could be over at this point if, Dallas had won that game, right? So it's this is 3-1, obviously Dallas's hand, but can they continue to play at this level? Can they continue to finish? Not to mention too, I think Ottinger has not been playing as well as we've seen him in past series. I think that Ottinger has kind of, he's been playing well, but, he's been letting a couple goals in there yeah, really? And it's in those kind of late game situations where Colorado's kind of coming back. I don't think anyone's questioning Dallas's ability to score. I think they have a lot of really good young talent, and Wyatt Johnston, he's playing well. And Heiskanen, he's played well in this series. You've seen a couple other guys get in there too, but can you continue to do it is my question, and 2, can Ottinger play at the level that we've seen him play before to close out this series? Because like you said, the Colorado Avalanche are not a bad team at all. They're a very good team. They got a lot of star players on there that can easily take over a series. But you do not want to let them get hot, because that if they get hot, they're going to start putting up some goals and they're going to start playing really well. And especially if Ottinger's not on, that's going to be a tough one to go against. But I don't know. Obviously the biased part in me is going to say Dallas in 5. That would be the nice. I would love for them to get some rest, especially after a 7-game series with the Vegas Knights. But I think this will go to 6. I think it's going to go to 6, and I think Dallas is going to win it in game 6 because they do play better on the road, and I think Dallas plays at home at game 5. In game 5. So I don't know, man. It's been a really entertaining series so far. I think Dallas has clearly been the better team, but I think it's up to Dallas to keep that pressure on.
Yeah, and Colorado. The reason I'll hit on a point that you said, Ottinger hasn't looked as good. I mean, Colorado has a generational talent at defenseman with Cale Makar, and that has been the problem this series for Dallas when they have lost when they have lost that game that they did lose to the Avalanche, and even recent games too. If you can neutralize Cale Makar, the defenseman for the Colorado Avalanche, it's over. It's over. And that's pretty much what Dallas has done these last 2 games. The first game, they let him kind of go crazy. And then the other player is Nathan McKinnon, their star, as well, with the Colorado Avalanche. And he can't do everything himself. He's creating so many scoring chances. But when you have Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn, who were on like your third line, really? Dude. I mean, come on. Teams that win Stanley Cups, you got to have guys that have depth like that. And Tyler Seguin has scored. And Jamie Benn has been a son of a bitch this whole series. If you do anything, Jamie Benn's in your face. Arguably, a couple calls should have got him suspended, but they didn't. And he's still running through people. And it's insane to me that he had that hit. And I don't remember what game it was, but the dude looked dead on the ice. In Colorado, nothing. You don't see that in hockey. If you take out a player, it doesn't matter if the hit was clean or not, you're answering the bell. Not only did he not answer the bell, he still hasn't answered the bell. And I understand that Colorado, if you go back and you watch them, they're not doing a bunch of fights. That's not Colorado's game. I get that. But when you knock out a defenseman in the middle of the game, that's a tone setter. And you just told a team that they can do that. Nothing's going to happen now. So what has Dallas been doing? They've been a lot chippier towards Cale Makar. They've been a lot chippier towards Nathan McKinnon. They've been a lot chippier towards all of the other guys, and they've been dragging them down just like they did in the Vegas series, and they're going to probably win it in 6. Like I said, the only reason I don't have Dallas winning it is because Hintz is out, and that is a player that's been very good. Tanner nailed it. Heiskanen, Robertson. Like, you've got guys on Dallas on the second line that are most other teams' first-line guys, which is insane. So they've got a ton of depth, and last thing we'll say about this series. There's 2 teams. I don't even think I can put them in the same category. I can't put them in the same category. But Avalanche's goaltending has not been the greatest. I was going to say there's definitely one team in the NHL, in this NHL playoffs, that needs to address goaltender, and that's the Edmonton Oilers. The Avalanche goaltender played pretty solid, but Dallas is just making him look pretty bad some of these games, right? And Dallas, none of these games have been close until the third period. Like you said, they gave up a 3-goal lead. They also gave up a 4-goal lead the other night, but they ended up closing it out. Dallas, if like, they have played well through the first 2 periods, every single one of these games, it's just they collapse in the third.
Yeah.
And there's another series that we're going to hit on in a second that we're going to move to next, that another team does the exact same thing. They collapse in the third. But Dallas, you cannot collapse in the third. They gave up 7 goals in the third in 2 games.
Yeah.
That's not good. And Ottinger's got to get a little bit better there. But other than that, Dallas has looked like the better team, like you said. And this team is so deep.
It's very deep.
They're so deep. Do you have anything else in this series, or are we good to move on?
Yeah, I just want to say too, like, on your point with Ottinger, I think it's a good segue because, coming into this series, Dallas was very, very good in the third period, in these Stanley Cup playoffs. They had, kind of locked down Vegas going into that third period, and much through that third period. There was a stat, I don't remember exactly what it was, but, Ottinger was lights out in the third period. He's not letting any goals in, maybe 1 or 2, and then in the series, it's just like, what happened? Where did it go? And I think, to your point, it makes a lot of sense with Nathan McKinnon, but you got Jack Eichel, you got Marchessault in the last series too. And I think that they were facilitating a lot of those plays. And in my opinion, I think that they looked better. I think that the scoring chances that Vegas had as compared to, this Dallas or this Colorado series, I think were much better. I think that they just facilitate the puck a lot better, especially when that first line is out for Vegas. And I think that they can just get a lot better scoring chances, from that first line of Vegas. And it's really weird to see that Ottinger just kind of like isn't really the same kind of player in the third period in this series against Colorado, especially like you said, with Dallas is having a lot more success, especially on their defensemen, and especially on their attacking from Dallas's defensemen too. So it's been really interesting to see Ottinger's struggles. But I think as the series goes on, he gets better. So hopefully he's going to stand out and do his thing.
Yeah, and the last thing I wanted to hit is, the Colorado Avalanche do have a player, Gabriel Landeskog, that's been injured for over a year, and that's a guy that they're missing here. If they had him, this series could be a little bit different. But I agree with what you're saying about Jack Eichel. and Nathan McKinnon. You can kind of put him on the same train. I definitely put Nate Dogg above Jack Eichel, even though Jack Eichel is a USA hockey player alongside with Austin Matthews. Those are probably some of the best USA hockey players we got. But Cale Makar, there's nobody in the league that's close to him. And Cale Makar is going to go down as this generation's best defenseman, and it's not even going to be close. This kid has already broken so many records, and the names that are on this list are like Nicholas Lindstrom, Bobby Orr. I mean, these are names that you don't even get close to that, and he's already there, and he's already got a cup, and his name's Cale. He does a great Clips commercial. I mean, come on now. The dude's salad's not the best, but he is absolutely the best defenseman in the NHL, in my opinion. And if you're a hockey fan, watch this kid play. And if you are a kid that's getting into hockey and you're a defenseman, model your game after him, because this guy is unbelievable. He is an offensive defenseman that also has the ability to jump back in the defensive side and make a complete difference. And it's crazy. It's like, Chad, you're talking about a defenseman and he's offense first. Yeah, that's this new age NHL. A lot of these defensemen aren't 6'5", 280 pounds and running you through the building like they did, in the 90s and before that. You've got guys that are faster than forwards out there, and that's insane. And Cale Makar is one of those guys. Oh, and by the way, he's got a freaking cannon from the point, and he can put it anywhere. And what has he been doing this series from the point? Dominating Dallas. Absolutely dominating Dallas. Neutralize Cale Makar, you win the series. It's that easy. Nathan McKinnon can get a couple, but Dallas has proved, like you said, that they can score, and they can score at a high rate. But what I'm interested to see about Dallas is, when do they run into the first goaltender that's the goaltender? Because they haven't had that yet. In the next series, they're not going to get it again, especially if Edmonton wins. And we'll talk about this series now. Tanner's got the Stars in 6. I've also got the Stars in 6. We got Vancouver Canucks against the Edmonton Oilers, number 1 seed against the number 2 seed. The Stars were the number one seed. The Avalanche were the number 3 seed. But this series is tied 2-2, the Canucks and Oilers, and it should not be.
Should be 3-1.
The Vancouver Canucks are putting on just unbelievable hockey with minimal shots in the series. Edmonton's goaltending has been trash, garbage can, the worst in the entire playoffs. They changed midway through the third, their last goaltender, and then this one came in and had a pretty good game against Vancouver, but gave up some soft ones in the third and almost lost it again. But Edmonton comes back and scores with 30 seconds left in the game and wins it off of kind of a squeaker, but kind of a laser two from the point. But Vancouver, I would not have expected this. I would not have expected Vancouver to not only make this a series, but they have a very, very good opportunity to win this series, and they have looked like the better team, even though they haven't gotten as many shots. Now, the last couple games, I do think Edmonton has looked superior, but it's this goaltending. You have 17 shots at one point for Vancouver, and you're at 31 shots for Edmonton, and it's a 1-2 game. That's not good. That's not good. 17 shots and you let one go in, that is not good. And then they got another one in at the point, and the goaltender was playing real well up until that point. He had only played around, like 20 to 30 games in the regular season, so he hadn't played a ton, but he's played better than the Edmonton starting goaltender. If Edmonton had an actual goalie, no disrespect, but if they had an actual goalie, this series I'd be interested to see what this series would be, because Edmonton has so many shots and has so many scoring chances, but Vancouver's goalie has stood on his head through the third period. And Edmonton has not done that at all. And when you have guys, this is insane. Go look at the playoff leaders right now in points. Edmonton is number 1, number 2, and number 3, with Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, and Hyman. The number 1, number 2, and number 3 point leaders in the NHL. And the series is 2-2. And you have a massive, massive fan base in Vancouver that is not wrong that they are in this series and they can easily win this series. If Edmonton gives up an early goal, I don't know what happens, because Vancouver can score another 2 goals off of 10 shots. So if Vancouver surpasses 30 shots in a game, I think they probably win. Edmonton has to have 50 at that point. So In conclusion with this series, if Vancouver's goalie can continue to stay on his head, I got Vancouver. But I cannot pick against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl because I just want them to move on. I want to see him play in the finals. I want to see McDavid. I want to see the Stanley Cup patch on his jersey. He's like the best player ever. He's so fun to watch. But he has not been playing that well. I mean, he has. He doesn't never play bad. It's those three guys on the team. Last thing I'll say, Tanner, sorry to just take over on this series. They got to have somebody else in Edmonton step up. If it's not these three guys, you got to have somebody else step up. When you have the top 3-point leaders in the entire playoffs and you're losing games, that's not good. That's not good. Usually it's a defense problem or a goaltender problem, and it's a little bit of both. And the other forwards can't seem to score or find the back of the net. But good luck, Tanner. I don't think there's anything left to say. I took like all the meat on that bone on that series.
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much covered it all. But I think too with I think Edmonton should be an even bigger hole that they are right now. You go back and you look at that game 4, Edmonton squeak out at, a goal with like 40 seconds left after Vancouver ties, after Edmonton being up like the whole game. So it's like they realistically should be down like 3-1 at this point, and Edmonton should be having to crawl back. But I think that you got to give that to the credit of the Canucks because they have just been playing outstanding throughout this entire series. And, it's just
their coaching.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, you look at, no one's going to doubt the Edmonton's ability to score. We know they can go down and they can score, but it's like, how much can you limit that? You know what I mean? And I think that's the big thing for them in this series, Vancouver, that is, how much can we limit them and how much can we, just play off of that counterattack and just continuously, try and get pressure on, like you said, on Edmonton's goalie, who's really hasn't had a good playoff. So I think if they can figure that situation out, I think they'll be fine. I think Edmonton's the better team, but I think Vancouver looks like the better team in this series. I think that Edmonton, while they have, like you said, this top 3 leaders in points this season, I think Vancouver has looked like the better team throughout the series. So it's going to be interesting to see where it goes through. But Vancouver continued to score like this, it's going to be lights out.
I'm going to go Edmonton in 7.
That's damn it.
Is that what you were going to do?
I was going to say that exact same thing.
Okay, so then you'll switch it because I said it first. You'll switch it to Vancouver in 7 and watch. You're going to be right. I'm taking Edmonton in 7 because I want Connor McDavid in the Stanley Cup. I want it. I need it.
He's not getting there. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. He can make it to the next round, but like it's just not going to happen unless the Stars don't win, which would be surprising. But it's just not going to happen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that next series against the Stars. No, I don't think anybody takes out the Stars in the West. I don't. And that's a great call. They just have so much depth, and if you think about it too, Dallas and Edmonton, that's a horrible nightmare matchup for Edmonton fans because guess what? Dallas is like the best scoring team in this playoffs. So have fun with that one.
Over to the East.
Panthers and Bruins. If you want to watch fights, if you want to see penalty minutes, that's this game. One of the games had 132 penalty minutes. Let me repeat that. 132. A penalty in the NHL, folks, is 2 minutes, and a fighting can be a 5. And then you can get a 10-minute penalty if you do something real bad, and get a game as well. There were a lot of 10 minutes given out in that 132 penalty minute game, but it's just a bunch of fighting. In Florida, we have to hit on this. You have Matthew Tkachuk fighting Pastrnak from the Boston Bruins. These guys are not only leaders for their team, they are some of the best players in the NHL, and they are Matthew Tkachuk is a little bit more of a fighter. I don't think I've ever seen Pastrnak drop the gloves one time ever or even get close to, but he did. He got pummeled by Tkachuk, but he did. And he earned that respect of everybody on the Boston Bruins and everybody on the Florida Panthers and everybody in that building watching the game. Because that is a guy that goes out and scores top cheddar and then looks at you and goes away from the bench and does not drop the gloves. But he did against Tkachuk. He went back to his bench. If you were watching the game, I was seeing it. He went back and asked his coach if he could do it.
and the coach said he could do it, and then he went and did it. So that's unbelievable for a guy like that to do it. But here's my question. Why did nobody else step in? I get it. It's just those two. You can't really do anything else, but I'd kind of just answer my own question. Everybody else did step in. That's the 132 penalty minute game, right? No, Boston and Florida, these teams play hockey the exact same way. They drag you down into the dirt. They make you slow your game up, and they capitalize on your mistakes. And they capitalize on the penalties that you take, most of them being reallocation penalties against Kachuk or Marchand on Boston. Now, Florida leads the series 3-2. Easily, Boston could win game 6 and make it a game 7. But I've talked enough about this series, Tanner. What are you seeing here, and who do you think is going to go through this series?
It's tough. You see, my heart wants to pick Florida just because, I think that Bobrovsky is a fantastic goalkeeper, and I think that he can absolutely win you a series, and I'm going to go, but I will go Florida in 7 because I think Boston has that kind of, that firepower that they just kind of unleash, whenever they can. This series has been pretty back and forth. I think the first 2 games were just absolute blowouts from either team. And then, that's when the series started at that point. At that point, it's a best of 5 who can win, the first of 3. And I don't know. I think Florida has had their chances. I think Boston has had their chances. They've kept it a lot closer, and they've kind of gotten a little bit more comfortable in this series, especially like you said with those penalty minutes, giving one team a little bit of a victory. But I don't know, man. It's going to be hard for Boston to win the next 2, in my opinion, with Florida being as good as they are. I think that they're just, like you said with Kachuk, I think that I think he's been really good in this series. And like I said with Bobrovsky, it's hard to keep him, out. I'm kind of like mesmerized from last year's performance and this past season performance from him. He just took on a new, role of his own, and he's just, in my opinion, one of the most talented goalkeepers in these playoffs. So I think he's like my X factor going into these next 2 games, and I just don't think that Boston can win 2 in a row. I don't think you're going to keep Florida off, going 0-2 in these next 2 games. So give me Florida and give me them in 7.
There you go. I'm also taking Florida. I've been watching this whole series. I've been watching all hockey a little bit more than NBA, but I've seen every one of these hockey games. And Florida's too good. Florida's just too good. If Boston can take it to a game 7, they might be able to edge them out because up until this series, Boston's goaltender was the best goaltender in the playoffs, believe it or not. If you look at the statistics, but I don't think Boston's going to take it this year, folks. I think the Panthers are going to go ahead and move right on. But I'm going to actually have them do it in 6 because I think if it goes to a game 7, I think it's likely that Boston can win because look what happened in the first round. If you let Boston get to game 7, you're going to be in trouble.
But they almost
series
that one, but yeah.
Literally against the Maple Leafs. You probably watched that game. Go watch the highlights if you haven't. It's not the best. Game 6, the Rangers lead the series 3-2 against the Carolina Hurricanes. The Rangers went out to a 3-0 start. They were 7-0 in the playoffs, didn't lose a single game, and then the Hurricanes came back and stole 2. The Hurricanes got a lot of guys that I like. They got Aho. They got one of my favorite players with Jarvis. This guy is so funny and is the exact, I think, hockey player I would be if I was actually that good. He just lets you know exactly what he's feeling. And I saw a press conference with him, and they asked him about how he gave up a goal, and he was like, "That was brutal, wasn't it?" Like, you don't have a guy that gives up a goal and is laughing at himself. You don't have a lot of that in the NHL. He's so awesome. Seth Jarvis, that guy is incredible. And selfishly, I want the Hurricanes to win this series. I wanted the Hurricanes to beat the Rangers, but it's going to be real tough to make that happen. But the Rangers have looked like the better team in the first 3 games, and the complete script has folded in these last ones. So the Hurricanes got to win 4 in a row. They have won 2 in a row. If they get it to a game 7, this is the Hurricane series, in my opinion. Just like if Boston gets it to game 7, it's their series. Carolina has a chance to shut them out. They lead the series, the Rangers have a chance to shut them out. They lead the series 3-2. All they got to do is win one more. Igor Shesterkin, their goalie, has got to have one solid game, and then it's on to the next round. but I'm not sure 100% that's going to happen. So I'm gonna, you know what? I'm gonna go McCain's. I got McCain's in 7 games. What do you got, Tanner?
I'm gonna go. I got New York. I think that they win. I think they win in this next game. I think they take them out in 6. I just think it's too hard for a team to come back from being down 3-0 in a series to then win the next 4. It's like, yeah, I mean, you got to give the Rangers their flowers too. I understand the Hurricanes, they got a lot of guys, but like the Rangers were by points the best team in the NHL this season, and I think that they showed that against the Capitals too. Your point, like you were talking about, they absolutely destroyed up on them, and I think they've been very, very good in this series, at least early on. If they can refine that kind of groove, get in that groove, I think that they can win this. I think that they can take them out. I think that they're the better team, and I think that they have been all season. So give me the Rangers in 6, and just for the reason that it's hard to win 4 in a row, especially against a team like this who's been as hot as they've been.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I'm going against Vegas here, definitely. Last thing we got, if you've been listening to the podcast, you know that I am a San Jose Sharks fan. And for the first time in franchise history, the San Jose Sharks are holders of the number 1 overall pick in the upcoming NHL draft. First time in franchise history that we've been awarded it, like I said. Sharks have finished with the lowest points in the league with 47. Then the Chicago Blackhawks were there with 52, followed by the Anaheim Ducks with 59. As fun as it would be, to pair up a future number 1 overall pick with the league's next superstar, Connor McDavid or Connor Bedard, or the face of literally NHL, Trevor Zegras. It's not happening this year. The Sharks come out and get it, and they hold all the cards, and will put literally all of their chips in on this pick to build around for the future for their franchise. So who's the pick? Only one name comes to mind, and that's Macklin Celebrini, forward out of Boston University. Celebrini's unbelievable and easily the number 1 overall prospect in this upcoming NHL draft by a long shot. He has won Hockey East Player of the Year, Hockey East Rookie of the Year, Hockey East Scoring Champion, Hockey East 3 Stars Award, in the most prestigious award of all in college hockey, the Hobey Baker Award for the best player in college hockey. For Boston University, he had 86 points in 50 games. That's averaging almost 2 points a game. That's insane. Not to mention, get ready for it, Tanner, Celebrini is only 17 years old.
That's pretty young.
So Celebrini not took over games, but did it against the best teams in Division I college hockey. He's got wicked hands. The ability to keep the puck on a string when he's moving down the ice is right there. You need that in the NHL, and he's got it. Puck control while keeping his head up is key to not getting crushed, and Celebrini always has his head on his swivel. I did see him take a couple big hits, but overall, he's not going to take a ton of big hits in the NHL. It's kind of like Connor Bedard. He's very good at bracing for those hits, even though it's kind of the smaller player. Great offensive vision, doesn't always look to shoot. He will sacrifice a shot for a better pass, which for the San Jose Sharks is going to be interesting because he's really going to come in and be that goal scorer. So we'll see kind of who develops into that role for the Sharks. He's got a wicked 1T off the top face-off circle that will be lethal on the power play in the future. The release of his snapshot / wrist shot is so fast, quite literally leaving goalies having no clue where the puck is coming from. In college hockey, he had an open shot against a top 4 ranked team. Open shot meaning no one was screening and the goalie was frozen. And it was right in front of the slot. You don't see that. So he's got an absolute wicked shot. As you can see, Celebrini is a prospect that does not come around and has pretty much every box checked. Again, only 17 years old this kid is, which is absolutely insane. Now, you might be asking yourself, how does Celebrini compare, to the most recent number 1 overall draft picks? Well, stacks up pretty well against his competition, but some recent draft picks, only talking number 1s, have had more hype coming out of him, college juniors, believe it or not. Connor Bedard, one that I just mentioned, generational talent, superstar, just like Sidney Crosby, just like Alexander Ovechkin, Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, all recent number 1 overall picks. Those prospects don't come around often, and you're lucky to see so many in the recent years with the combined growth of this wonderful game around the world. Celebrini isn't in that category to me personally, but he's right there and could be on that trajectory if he continues to score like he did at Boston University at the next level. Instead, Celebrini to me seems to be on the superstar level. Jack Hughes, comes to mind. New Jersey Devils #1 overall pick in 2019. And I do think he's a better prospect than Yurgi Slavkovsky, the Montreal Canadiens #1 overall pick in 2022, and Alexis Lafreniere, the New York Rangers #1 overall pick in 2020, and then another New Jersey Devils pick in 2017. I do think he's better than Nico Hischier as well. Lastly, about the Sharks, the most recent years have been the worst in franchise history. They have not have a positive record since the 2018-2019 season. So what have the Sharks been doing since 2018? Well, they've gotten rid of every single one of their guys pretty much on their team, and they've put all their resources into the draft, and it has completely paid off despite the horrendous record over the previous season. This team is top 5 in terms of farm system in the NHL, and that means they will be a thorn in everyone's side in a couple seasons. And by the way, that is not factoring in the fact that they're going to have Macklin Celebrini. So realistically, the Sharks could jump up to number 2 or number 3 farm systems in the NHL, which is awesome to hear, especially as a Sharks fan. Some of the prospects that they've added over the most recent drafts, kind of going in order: Will Smith, Shakir Mukahamid, Luca Cagliani, Quentin Musty, Daniel Gushin, Jake Forong, Cameron Lund, Matthias Havlin, Thomas Bordeaux, Philip Bistich, and Henry Thurn. Except this year, like I said, they get the first pick in the NHL draft. It's exciting times for Sharks fans, and Celebrini is a can't-miss prospect and an immediate impact starter once he's in that Sharks teal. Tanner, I had to just go ham there for a second. I'm sorry. I know you're, a new hockey fan, and I know you haven't necessarily seen Macklin Celebrini, but what do you think?
I mean,
Exciting times for your brother in Sharks Nation, baby.
it's about goddamn time is what I'm hearing, because they made, it's been a little bit of a rough life for you as a Sharks fan, which I'm very sad to hear. But they finally got a chance at a #1 guy, and comparing it to my experience with basketball, the Spurs just recently got the #1 overall pick with Victor Wembanyama. They actually have the number 4 overall pick and 8 in this upcoming draft. Fun fact. But that was like a pick that absolutely is going to change the franchise. They went from being like the worst team in the NBA to Victor Wembanyama is the rookie of the year and arguably could have been the defensive player of the year, given who you were talking to. So it's like, yeah, he's going to completely change that franchise, and he's going to continue to help them get better, especially, with the guys they put around him. So it's just one of those things, like if you get lucky in a lottery draft, it can transform your franchise for years to come. And especially in a game like hockey, where you kind of need these guys to step up, and you need these guys with talent, and they're young, and he's 17. He's only going to get better. Like he's not even done learning yet. Like he doesn't even have a high school degree yet, So it's just like, it's one of those things. He's still getting better.
Hold on. He's graduated high school. He has.
Well, no, I know he's graduated high school, but in terms of like age and stuff like that.
Age. Yeah.
Obviously he's not coming from high school into the pros. You can't do that anymore. But it's like, it's like the joke where it's like, he's 20 years old, he can't even drink yet, kind of thing. But like, he can't even either do that. He's still got 4 more years to that.
He's got 4.
But if you were a regular kid, he'd still be in high school right now. He wouldn't even be looking at it. So it's like, he's still so young, and he's still got so much in the tank, and he's got a bunch left to learn. You know what I mean? So I'm really excited for the Sharks. I think it's going to be, we saw the transformation that Bedard kind of had on the, in Chicago, where it's just like, he's just hands down better than anyone else. So I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be interesting. But we are at 2 hours and 2 minutes now. So if you're still listening, thank you. But we've covered a lot of ground. We've covered a lot of ground today. It's been very good, but I'm excited for these playoffs to continue going. I'm excited for the NBA and the NHL, and we're pretty much done with the NFL for this season. We're gonna have to wait until training camp till the next big thing for the NFL. But you got any last closing remarks, Chad?
No, we'll throw in some fun NFL games. We're gonna do a lot of games this offseason. One of them that I'll kind of hold a carrot in front of you is, the best young team, the best players under 25. Tanner and I are going to see if we can make an entire roster of guys that are under 25. When is that going to be? Who knows? There's also going to be a ton of rumors in the NFL that start to go on right now. You saw that Jared Goff got his contract, so that means these quarterback contracts are coming. When these contracts get get hit, we'll definitely talk about them each week. We'll let you know what we think about them. We've got wide receivers, arguably number 1 and number 2 in the league right now with Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. Haven't signed the contracts yet, and they are holding out of training camp. So we're definitely going to, hit more NFL news whenever it comes through, but we're really going to be focusing on the NHL playoffs, the NBA playoffs. Tanner's our basketball guy. And then, we'll see what else we got in there. But that was a lot of sports talk for today. Thank you, folks, for listening, and really appreciate all of the interaction and all of the comments and all of the likes and everything on the NFL draft stuff that we've been doing. We're going to get bigger and better, and we're going to keep putting on more NFL draft content for you next year. And I'm going to be releasing these prospects way earlier than I did now. And if you ever want to check out any of our articles or our sports blog, all you got to do is go to rdhsports.net. And all of the articles there about the NFL prospects are there, as well as a brand new sports blog that I'm going to be putting in, random stuff. I got a lot of sports knowledge. I'm going to be going to a bunch of different sports in that sports blog. So check it out, rdhsports.net. Tanner, let's end this thing.
Later, folks.